We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Antry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions for the final time in the year 2023. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, because all of that is going to happen before the next episode after this one comes out in podcast land. So there we are. Celebrate, everybody. Wait for us for 2 weeks. We will be back.
So, while you're waiting for 2 weeks, I want you to think about the last 24 hours of my life.
Okay.
This is what I want you to think
The
about.
last 24 hours
first of
before
all,
we recorded this episode. So, yeah, this is
That's
way
right.
in the past as you're hearing this.
So let's just, for a moment, realize that terrible things are happening all over the world, and I realize that, and that nothing that could possibly be happening to me is as bad as what's happening to other people. Let's just preface
We're
that
dispensing with this is not literally quite life and death.
the worst.
But
Yes, it is not that.
But it's the first world problem.
Wednesday. So we record on Tuesdays.
Yes.
Wednesday is the day that the carpet goes in, which means at that point, it's done.
Ooh, wow.
All the renovations are done. I can start putting my home theater back together. It's very, very
Just
exciting.
before Christmas time. That is super exciting.
That is very exciting. So yesterday morning, my wife says to me, so annoying. I have a meeting, and it's a virtual meeting. She was working from home.
Okay.
I have a meeting, but my crown just fell out.
Oh.
I was flossing my teeth,
Yeah.
and I knocked out a crown, and now I have to go to the dentist, and it's probably going to cost a couple $100. This is not what we need right now. It's Christmas time. I don't have time for this. It's a real pain.
It's an inconvenience for sure.
Inconvenience. So I'm like, well, that sucks. I'm sorry to hear that. Hope you have a better day. I got to go to work, blah, blah, blah. So I leave. A couple hours later, she says, she calls me and says, I am going to have a mental breakdown.
Ooh.
I said, oh my God, what? Is it the tooth thing still? Are we still worried about that tooth? I'll be honest. I didn't even say that because I forgot about the tooth. That's how inconsequential this was to me. She said they were about to replace the baseboards in our son's room. Okay. Which is the only thing that got damaged in there by the water. Okay. So in the carpet, they were about to replace the baseboards, and they noticed that the wall was spongier than it should be. It should be attached firmly to the base, but it is not. So they tore it out, and there's black mold in our son's room.
Lovely. There is still moisture coming in somewhere.
Well, this could be old, could be new. Who knows? We don't know. Okay. So she's like, they stopped working. They've canceled the carpets. We have to call the insurance company. This whole thing is off. And she's like, I can't believe we're dealing with black mold again. Because remember, during COVID, we had black mold in our kitchen, and the whole kitchen came out. It was like a big deal.
It did, yes. It was a very big deal.
So she's having PTSD and everything else, but it's right underneath a window, and it's kind of contained in that little area. But it's big enough that if it's over 10 square feet or whatever it is, they have to call a mitigation company and abatement and all that. It's going to be thousands of dollars.
Oh yeah, so that's a thing. That is a thing.
Gotta call the insurance company. I'm like, that's terrible. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Don't worry, we'll get through it. We'll get through it. She hangs up the phone with me. She's like, I'm on the way to the dentist. We're going to get my crown fixed. She hangs up the phone with me. Like 30 minutes later, my son calls me, and she says, I thought I had a flat tire. He's driving my wife's car. Okay. I thought I had a flat tire, and I pulled over, and one wheel is facing straight, and the other one's at an angle. I'm like,
right.
That's not good.
Very not good.
I call my wife, and she's like, it's her car. Yeah. I call my wife, and she says, I say, are you sitting down? And she said, no. I said, well, too bad. And I tell her, so she goes out there. The axle has fallen off the bottom of her car.
Wow.
Like the rust or whatever, something has rusted through, and we take it to our mechanic. The mechanic says, "Don't take it here. We can't do anything with this.
Okay.
Take it to the dealership.
Yeah.
Because that's the only chance you have of getting this fixed.
Getting the official part for it, yeah.
It's not an official part. It is like they're like, this is falling off and this is rusted through and this is they're like, there's a good chance this car is toast. Like
it's the whole undercarriage.
Though yesterday was just fun.
When it rains, it pours.
Fun. Well, I was at work and I had forgotten about the stupid tooth thing,
right?
And I was like, these things happen in threes, right? I know I'm not really superstitious, but these things happen in threes. I'm thinking about the black mold and the car falling apart. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't want to drive home. I'm going to get hit by a meteor. I'm going to get run over by a train.
Oh man,
or something. So, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to us. We were trying to figure out if we had the finances to take a little trip.
That question has been answered.
That has been answered.
Yes.
We do not.
There's a definitive answer to that now. Yeah.
I almost got my home theater painted a darker color though, because they bought the wrong paint. They bought the next level down.
Okay.
So I had software and they bought cyberspace.
Yes.
And they started painting and then they went, this doesn't look right. I mean, it is a significantly darker color. It's quite a bit darker.
It would have looked nice. It honestly would have looked nice. It's a very nice.
It would have looked nice. I really do like. I think software is like it's just dark enough, but not too dark.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I agree,
I really like that color. So they are going to. I cannot tell you. And my wife and I are very pragmatic about these things. It's just money. It's easy to say if you have enough of it, which I don't know that we do, but it's just money. It's just things. It's just inconvenience. It's not.
Do you have insurance on the car as well? Insurance is a helpful thing.
I don't know that that this is going to cover anything. I don't know how this gets covered. So. We don't want to call the insurance because if you calling your car insurance is like asking for a higher bill. You only call when you know you have to. Because if you don't, then if you call when you don't have anything, they're like, oh yeah, we can't. That's not really covered, and your insurance bill goes up. You're like, Jesus, but you didn't pay me anything. You didn't do anything.
What a fabulous business things are running down there.
So we're not sure. So we're waiting today. So I've got my phone sitting next to me right here.
Sure.
It's on silent, but my phone's sitting next to me because I'm waiting for multiple calls from multiple people about multiple things.
Yeah.
So if I suddenly disappear, you will know because you can see me.
That is the reason
I
why.
may or may not say anything. I'm looking at my phone, and I don't even know if it's on silent, if it shows a image. I hope it does to tell me that
it should vibrate, but I missed your text this morning because I had it only on vibrate and not actually making a noise while I was putting together the topic list. So I missed that. And when Tom was saying, I'll see him, that was referring strictly to me. I'm seeing him on the Skype call. Nobody on YouTube is seeing Tom. No. He's still a logo because, as we have just heard, the home theater is not back together yet and won't be for a little while.
We were so close, Rob.
That is what they have to do.
So close.
You can't.
We were 2 days.
Feel the tantalizing pain without the hope. It's the hope that hurts. You must have it.
So I don't know how we're going to pay for all this. I honestly don't. I honestly don't. And then, because the thing is, my neighborhood floods. We talk about this a lot. And I didn't even get to the fact that there was some crazy storm that happened last weekend.
Sure.
And we had to sandbag the garage door. We had to
all over again.
We had to do all of that, and it was fine. We were sure. That's why I didn't really talk to you about it. We were sure we were going to be fine. The only time this house is flooded, it was in this once in a lifetime. Well, until another iceberg melts. Once in a lifetime storm that just happened. Idalia. That it's the highest that it's ever been in this neighborhood.
Oh
ever,
boy,
that anybody can remember. And at least in the last 50 years or something like that. And that was the only time we flooded. So we were not worried about flooding. We were worried about other people in our neighborhood flooding. But it was a big inconvenience. And, and my Emotiva stealth headphone DAC thing literally exploded. We had power surge that went through. We could hear it. I went outside, you could hear the stuff. And then I saw videos later. There were, and I can send one to you. There were there were fires running down the power lines in my neighborhood. Like you could see go from block to block. The people were filming it with their phones as this fire went down the power line.
Holy smokes.
Just like all the way across. And so we were plugged into the APC and everything. And yes, I could call the APC company, but believe me, I'm not dealing with another warranty claim right now. And we were sitting there and we heard this. It sounded like somebody took like a hardcover book and slammed it on the ground as hard as they could. And I looked out, I was like, it came from over that direction. I went over there and there was smoke coming from the headphone amp.
Right.
I opened it up and one of the capacitors exploded.
Sure.
I mean, that's what it is. So. I mean, there's little pieces of it everywhere inside there. And I was like, oh, maybe I can replace it. Or I'm like, oh, or maybe I can just throw it away. Because I really don't care that much about that. But everything else seems to work in the house. We had to turn the power off for a couple hours, and there was a little bit of stress about that. But, I mean, that in relation to everything else that happened, I have forgotten that there was a storm this weekend.
Right.
In everything that's been going on. It has been...
Yeah, that is a time.
Well, you know, and I'm sure there's people who are listening to this podcast who are like, oh yeah, I can relate. I've had days like that.
Yeah.
And I mean,
undoubtedly.
And we've all been through stressful times and stuff. And my wife and I are not the kind of people that, that stress divides.
Okay.
You know, we don't get in fights with each other about stress all that often. I mean, of course, sometimes we get a little short with each other and that sort of thing.
That's
but
normal.
Things like this, you know, I'm immediately making jokes about it, and she's laughing.
Okay,
you know?
well, that's good. Yeah.
So, I won't remember how I got around to it, but you know, it was like I said something to her about how. You know, oh, I'm sorry. I know you had a really bad day. I'm sorry you had such a bad day. She goes, well, what part of it was bad? I'm like, well, the tooth thing, obviously.
Yes.
You know, the tooth thing was the big thing. I think she was worried that was going to cost us a lot of money. First of all, I blame her for this entire day because she said that. But it cost her, that was $25 for her to get it
right.
that back on. So, yes. Tom's very good, no good, very bad day.
Yeah.
Horrible, no good, very bad day.
Yeah, that was it.
That's.
Well, I'm sure my story tops it, which is that I took my car in for maintenance too, and it did need a part. I found a part on the front left wheel that was broken, little sensor that made the anti-lock brakes go off when they shouldn't, and so that part took an extra week to come in, so I had to come back a week later, and boy, with what I've been through, everything that Tom just said.
On Monday, was it Monday? Tuesday. No. Last week I went on Friday before the storm, and my wife has been complaining that in her car the seats in the front seats where you sit are deteriorated, and they're starting to the upholstery starting to rip, the leather starting to rip. So I took it into an upholstery place and put a $200 deposit down on the $500 repair for the seats in that car, and then the axle falls out the bottom. So she did call those people, and they were like, "Oh, we haven't ordered it yet. You want us to rip up this check?" And she's like, "Would you please rip up the check?"
Yeah, that car might be letting you know that it's time to let it go.
Well, I'm worried about my car now. It's not like, I drive through the same neighborhood with the same puddles and stuff around here. And, people are like, oh, well, you should rinse your car off after every time you go through a puddle.
Yeah, but in Florida, cars don't get the undercoating, do they? You don't bother with that.
Who's got the time? It comes from the
factory when you get it. But
well, I'm not that, John, that. I mean, it may have gotten it. This car, my car in particular, came from, I'm pretty sure it was born or lived in Cincinnati, Chicago. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it got some undercoating or whatever, but I'm sure the bottom of mine's rusted out too. So, geez, oh criminy. We don't know what we're going to do.
Yep.
Anyway, so that was my day.
That is it. That is our preamble.
What did you watch, Rob?
Okay. Yeah.
I'm gonna go do a couple of tequila shots and
yeah, that could be. So yeah, I'll start off. I watched the first half of the first season, which is the only season at the moment, of Twisted Metal.
Is that based on the video game?
It is very much based on the PlayStation video game, with some of the characters brought in from the video game. Now, the basic premise of the Twisted Metal video game is that it's essentially a deadly demolition derby. right? You have cars that are all armored up with guns all strapped to the cars, and you have these wacky characters that drive those cars in the video game, and you all go into an arena and you shoot at each other and throw bombs at each other and throw rockets at each other, and last man standing wins. That's the game.
I have never played that game, but I do remember when it came out.
Yes, and so there have been multiple sequels to Twisted Metal, the video game, and in all of them, that's basically, there is sort of like a tournament structure, and if you win, there's this character, Calypso, who has like mystical powers and can grant you a wish, but he's kind of a monkey's paw wish giver, so it's like the winner gets a wish, but then it always, you know, the words get twisted around, and that's sort of the whole deal with the Twisted Metal video games. So you might think, okay, that seems like should be fairly easy to adapt to a television show. You could have some kind of tournament, you could have somebody trying to, you know, they've got a wish that they need granted or whatever it is, and that seems like it would be no, they threw all of that out the window. They just completely threw out the premise of the video game. They basically held on to Sweet Tooth, which is the clown character, the demented clown character in the ice cream truck. They held on to him. Played really well in a sort of dual role. He's physically played by the professional wrestler Samoa Joe, who does a great job with the physicality. Really, really top-notch job, honestly. And then he's voiced by Will Arnett, who's also a producer on the show. So you have that duality going on. And he's almost like a second lead. He's not in the show as much as the actual lead, who is played by Anthony Mackie, who just goes by John Doe, because he has amnesia and doesn't remember where he came from and all that. But it seems as though the TV show version of it, which is on Paramount Plus, it's a Paramount Plus exclusive, it seems as though they were going by a Twisted Metal video game that never actually came out, which was Twisted Metal Apocalypse, never got released. And so it seems like that's the premise that they're going with for the TV show, because this is a post-apocalyptic world, and it's not a tournament. This is a delivery man story, right? He's got to go from one place to another, pick up something and bring it back. That's the story. It's kind of very Mad Max Fury Road-ish. You know, he's going to go somewhere and come back, and it's just the misadventures along the way, which of course, very much in the style of Walking Dead, always involves, in order to go from this point to the next point, you're going to have to do a favor for somebody, and that's pretty much what the show is about. And along the way,
fetch quests, that's for sure.
Along the way, Anthony Mackie's character pairs up with Stephanie Beatriz's character. She played Rosa on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And so those two, really good. Anthony Mackie seems to be doing his best Will Smith impression, because he really has the mannerisms and vocal sound of Will Smith in this TV show. Very, very much so. But of course, Stephanie Beatriz is always a joy to watch, with her, still playing very sullen and stoic character in this, but with the little moments that shine through. So I was a little bit surprised, because honestly, if there's one weakness of this Twisted Metal TV show, it's the car action scenes.
Really?
And it's not that they're bad. It's just that it seems like they were storyboarded, and then they quite literally just shot the storyboard, but didn't pay a ton of attention to, did that previous shot actually line up and make sense with the following shot? Because there's the missing interstitials of, like, if you see one car shoot a rocket and you don't know where that rocket is going next, then you normally have the interstitial shot of, like, a character turning their head to look behind them or turning their head to see the rocket go by, and then you see what the rocket hits, right? That's sort of the normal action scene structure. Well, in this one, the rocket fires and then it hits the thing, and you have no idea what direction anything was going in between those two events happening. And so it's a bit disjointed in the car action scenes. And if there's any weakness of the show, it's that. They spend way more time on character backstory, character emotion, which was really not part of the Twisted Metal video games at all. And so it's really quite a different adaptation. Overall, I mean, there's plenty of weaknesses in the show. I can't say it's a great show. I haven't finished it yet, so I don't know how it all exactly wraps up. But yeah, I found it interesting, if not exactly faithful to the source material, and not what I expected. So yeah, there's some surprises to go along. There's some pretty strong performances, but then some pretty groan-worthy performances that are going on in it too. So a bit of a mixed bag on Twisted Metal. And then as far as a movie I watched this week, I watched No Hard Feelings. That came out recently. That's Jennifer Lawrence. This is like, well, it is a comedy, and there are moments that I laughed out loud at it. It is all about an exceedingly uncomfortable and inappropriate situation that is going on. If the genders were reversed in any way, it would be completely unacceptable. And so this all goes about with the idea of if there's, an older woman who's, in this case, Jennifer Lawrence, and playing a person who's only 32, but older than the male character that she's pursuing. And so, it all goes on this sort of comedy of, well, that's okay. That's perfectly okay. And lucky guy, hey, it's Jennifer Lawrence, for the reasons that are explained in the movie, going after this younger guy. But yeah, it was meant to be uncomfortable, and it is. Now, one of the issues is that Jennifer Lawrence, who is very funny in real life and very self-effacing and everything like that, and we know she can be extremely funny, but she is such a good dramatic actress. Like, she really is a really good dramatic actress. And she's such a good dramatic actress that when she's playing a character where all of the comedy comes from a source of pain, which is most comedy, it comes from pain, but that's what she's doing there. But it's too real. Like, the pain is too real that it's not actually all that funny. It's supposed to be funny, but she's too good at you seeing the pain behind everything that she's doing for you to actually, for me anyway, to actually really get a good belly laugh. She
has too many dimensions is the problem. She needs to be more two-dimensional. She
needed to be a bit more farcical, and you can laugh at it. Was like, you're just kind of a real person, and this is a very uncomfortable, not great situation. And then there is some major problems with the plot, which is that this was clearly all like done backwards. Like, okay, why is she doing this? And like, let's work all the reasons backwards to the point that it does not make any logical sense. Like, there's too many layers. She is trying to pay the back taxes on her house. That's her motivation. Fine, great, makes total sense. But then we go from the only way, apparently, that she can make any money is by being an Uber driver, and then something happens to her car, so then she needs to get a new car, so then she needs to do this thing for these people, which involves their son, which involves her going on this thing to, like, seduce the son, to all work its way backwards to getting a car. And it's like, wait a second, couldn't you have just asked the parents for some money directly instead of their car? Or was that the only like, there's just multiple layers where if you think about it for a second, like, no, none of that makes sense. And then the final problem with the movie is this is supposed to be an exceedingly painfully introverted boy. Like, he's 19 now, but young, very young adult. He's supposed to be so painfully introverted that his parents are actually like interceding on his behalf because they're so worried about him socially and him going off to college, being completely socially unprepared. This is the most confident person I've ever seen. Like, he has no problem asking people out, playing the piano in front of people. Like, he's like, oh, no, I don't want to do it. But like, oh, come on, that's all the prompting it takes. And then he's up there and it's like he's ridiculously confident. None of it made any sense on that front of it. And I don't know if it was supposed to be like such an anachronism to what was just said about him that we're supposed to laugh at it, but that didn't work if that was the comedy they were going for. So another pretty mixed bag in this. I did have points that I laughed at it, but this is a movie where if you go in wanting to not like it and wanting to not laugh, it will be very easy for you to meet those goals. If you have to go into it wanting to laugh, and I did, and therefore I was able to laugh at parts, but I'm like, as just a get everybody on board, laugh along with it comedy, I'm like, there were plenty of problems in my opinion with no hard feelings. So, but not like that. The acting was bad. In fact, it might have been too good to be a belly laugh comedy. That's sort of my criticism of it in a backhanded compliment way. I'm done. What did you watch, Tom?
Yeah, so a comedy like that, what you really need is a character who is desperately trying to uncomplicate their life, but then things become more complicated despite them, which is, if you're looking for a comedy like that, it's Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, where Steve Martin is just trying to get home. Yeah, a very uncomplicated thing.
There's lots of pain behind those characters. It's all there, and yet they strike the notes acting-wise that you're laughing at it the whole time.
Yeah. I watched The Menu. I did not finish X yet because I haven't had a chance. Okay. I also don't know that I'm gonna ever finish it simply because I need. I need comedy in my life right now.
Yes.
And this I watched before all this stuff happened.
Yeah. Not that X is an overly long movie or anything like that, but yeah.
So I started The Menu. I don't know why. And it's a short movie. And I watched it pretty much I watched it, and then my wife came in and we watched a little something, and then she went to bed and I finished it. So it was it was basically one sitting sort of I don't know how it got in the horror genre. It doesn't.
Okay.
I mean, I guess technically there's like blood
yeah.
and death and stuff, but
and it's a sort of a hostage situation, so there's that. It's tense. It's tense.
I did not find it tense at all. I found it. I found this movie, and Ray Fiennes is, in fact, almost everybody in this movie is like a reasonably good actor,
sure.
In some way, shape, or form. The ones that I recognize, the ones that I don't, of course, Anna Taylor-Joy or whatever her name is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, first of all, she doesn't look like she's ever eaten. So having her at a restaurant where they're like, she's like, I don't want to eat anything. I was like, yeah, I don't think she does eat anything. Look at her.
Believable. I could believe that.
So,
a cigarette and some water.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. I already had my celery stick for today, which is a terrible. I'm not making fun of. People with eating disorders. Believe me, I'm not. I'm just saying some people, I know people who eat like crazy and look like her, who just, their metabolism or whether their body or whatever makes it so that they are constantly, looking emaciated. So maybe she's that. As a person, plus, whatever actors have problems.
Actors, Hollywood.
Yeah. So as a whole, I found the movie to be, I did not find it tense. There was no point that I felt like
you care enough about anyone to worry for their safety.
I mean, there was just nothing. There was just, I just never connected with any part of it. I never connected with her. I never connected with the foodie guy, which I kind of should have connected with because I'm kind of the foodie guy. Yeah. I felt like all the characters don't really have that many redeeming qualities to begin with, which is kind of sort of the point.
That's pretty much the point, yes.
Of the whole thing. One review I saw of this movie kind of said the problem with this movie is it's really a movie maker or a movie making team, like writers and directors and everything else, who are complaining about critics.
Sure.
And it's just like sort of this is what we wish we could do to you. This is, kind of thing. And while that's interesting to watch from somebody who is in that industry and kind of irritated with the whole critical, side of it, it's not necessarily for everybody else as cathartic as it might be. For those people. And I think that's a fair criticism of this movie. It's almost like this movie wasn't made for me. And the fact that I didn't really like it that much isn't my fault as it is the fault that I'm not the intended audience, as though I am a performer. I perform on this podcast. I write reviews. I write books. I've performed on stage. So I have been on the other side of the critical, even though the reviews are kind of my end now, but I have been on the other side of it as well. And I do understand that it is very frustrating to have somebody who is to review and to criticize your work as and not have any way of responding to them. It's very frustrating. So that's what I felt like this movie was. And at the entire time I was like, I just didn't believe any of it.
Okay.
I didn't believe that he could get that many people in his kitchen to, cult or no cult, which is clearly what was going on
right
here. I just was like, somebody is going to be like, this is the dumbest idea I ever heard.
It is very heightened and very contrived, so you sort of have to just go with it. Otherwise, there's nothing to enjoy.
If you liked the movie, if you found it very tense
I rather enjoyed it.
I would not blame you. I was just like, I didn't connect enough with any of the characters. Sure. I didn't connect enough with her. There was nobody else to connect with. So if you didn't connect with her, you were out of luck. I didn't connect enough with any of these characters. And then her escape, if you want to call it that, was like, like, I know if I was in that room, what I would have done.
Okay.
I've been like, because it didn't really seem like it was that hard for her to get away. Like he was just looking for an excuse to let her go.
She wasn't supposed to be there in the first place.
She wasn't. I understand that, but as you know, I don't know. It is fun. I'm trying not to give anything away. Let's just get done with this.
Yes.
This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask us by emailing us at you ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can come to the website, find our episodes, our show notes, and our Flickr album so you can follow along with the pictures. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant. We'll say that if you comment on anything and you're critical of us, we're going to serve you a meal and kill you. Tom has had enough for 2023. He's not. He will brook no more criticism or cost expenditures. You know what the really bad part of this whole situation is, and as bad as all of the stuff I told you is where I am sitting and how I have these louvered doors in my bedroom, which is where I am right now, and they have mirrors on them because whoever built this place apparently like to watch themselves. But they're opened in such a way that I can see the growing bald spot on the back of my head as I am doing this podcast. So just to add insult to injury, I'm staring at the evidence of my own mortality.
Yep.
YouTube.com/AVRant, where you can see our recording sessions. I am a logo. Rob is, hopefully your lips are aligned. You can at least do that.
I have to choose a point in the video where they are, and then before and after they're not quite. That's the lovely sync of timing.
Everybody should try to find that one point and say that it was at this moment that his lips were aligned.
Yep.
Contact us directly, rob@avrant.com. His socials are at First Reflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. I do not do socials because life is pain and expenditure.
Social media is dying anyway.
Thank God. I think we've all learned that our inner voices should stay there. Because social media has proven,
or at least everyone else's ought to.
I know that mine should. That's why you see how much I post on Facebook, which is the only social media I do anymore. Our listeners of the week, support the podcast in some way, and you'll become a listener of the week. And go to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and leave a PayPal donation if you would like to buy me a car. That's how you can do it.
Yeah.
Tyler did this week, so thank you very much, Tyler.
Yes, thank you, Tyler, for the PayPal donation. We certainly appreciate your financial support.
That's right. We also, if you want to support us financially monthly without thinking about it, go to patreon.com/AVRant podcast, where you can be a monthly subscriber and contributor to our podcast. It's 134 patrons right now, so thank you very much to all of you.
Yes, indeed. That is patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So big thanks to our 134 patrons over there.
All right. If you can't support us financially, do something else, and we'll mention you here. Jack thought he had spotted a problem with the AV Gadgets website and sent a message to alert me, but it sorted itself out somehow. Move along, kids. Nothing to see here. I didn't get that.
Okay. Message? I mean, it went to the question at AVRant email address.
Oh, that's why I didn't get it, because I don't check that regularly. I will tell you that so Google, short version, Google sent me a thing that says Google sent me a thing about my whatever the analytics, right? So I went to my analytics and it said, and it wasn't tracking any data. So I did a bunch of stuff trying to fix it, and it turned out that, and it kept telling me it was fixed, but I kept not getting any data. Turns out I had to click on that was the old analytics, and there's a new analytics, and I was looking at the old analytics, which doesn't work anymore, but the new one worked just fine, and it had been. So I probably broke a bunch of stuff and then refixed it and whatever. And then there was an AdSense thing, which I integrated, and it put crazy ads everywhere. I couldn't figure out what was going on. So that may be what he saw.
Could have been during that time span. That's not out of the realm of possibility.
So if you're seeing ads on AV Gadget all over the place, or you did, and you're like, this is annoying, I agree. I tried to keep them off to the sides or whatever. I mean, I need ads. Everybody understands that. So, Jack, thank you very much for letting me know. I always appreciate when people let me know that I'm having a problem with one of my websites, because you know who doesn't go to one of my websites? Me. So,
thank you, Jack, for caring
I appreciate
and,
that. That's right.
and trying your best to help.
We also got notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going through my self-destructing life. Apparently, my house and cars and all of my belongings turning to dust in front of me like Thanos' snap.
Right.
My wife's teeth falling out of her face.
There you go.
The whole thing, Rob.
I mean, when we say it's all falling apart, that's fairly literal.
Over here, and then my growing bald spot. There's just nothing good happening right now. We've got notes of gratitude from Joe. Am I supposed to say this last name? Is that why it's written out?
Well, yeah, because he's been on our podcast as a guest co-host, so it's perfectly fine to say. Yeah, Joe
Klusnick.
Yes.
Appreciates all the time we put into the podcast. He's ready and willing to participate again as guest co-host anytime. Jonathan, who still enjoys listening every week, even when the content is not specifically relevant to his own theater. The CDEN 4.5, maybe at this point. We're not really sure. Dazz hopes everything is starting to get on the upswing for us, and Lee as well. Dazz.
Hopes dashed.
Now I have you to blame. So welcome to the blame train. It's leaving the station. Ben says happy holidays from Australia, including our complaints department. Jay, Kevin, who says all the best for the festive season and New Year. Thanks, Kevin.
Yep.
Stephen, who lives 2 hours north of Sydney, Australia, and a few days ago it was 46.5 degrees Celsius. Merry Christmas. That's this summer in Australia, and 46.5 is not cold.
I just say no to that. I reject that, Stephen. I refuse to believe that any surface
halfway
on
to
Earth
boiling
gets to that temperature. Nope. I'm in denial. It didn't get that hot. Nowhere could. No.
I didn't know that 46.5 was possible. I'll be honest with you. I think I've been in 43 before, and that's pretty miserable. 46.5. And Australians don't really super believe in AC. So, like
their houses,
concept,
as far as I know, are not well insulated.
No, they are not.
Right.
Another Kevin who says he appreciates us never missing a beat through sickness, floods, and everything else. Kevin, blame train, get on. And Anthony. So let's go through them again. Okay. Joe, Jonathan, Dazz, Ben, Jay, Kevin, Stephen, different Kevin, and Anthony. Thank you for thanking us.
Yes, indeed. I'll say the names one more time so they came from my lips. Joe, Jonathan, Dazz, Ben, Jay, Kevin S, Stephen, Kevin P, and Anthony. Thank you all very much for those notes of gratitude and encouragement. We are laughing through the pain over here, so that is appreciated. Thank you for appreciating us. And after this episode, we'll see you in the new year. And I would say it can only get better, but I don't know about that. It's going to get hotter. Floods are going to get worse.
You shut your Canadian mouth.
Hurricanes are going to get stronger. It's all very predictable. Oh, dear.
It's great being at my parents' house. They're climate deniers and everything else. And they keep talking about it every time I come over there. It's never been this bad. I can't understand it. I'm like, can't you, though? Can't you?
People in Australia, they've got those refugees who came over from the islands where they were living that no longer exist. Please try to deny that the land you were living on has now been swallowed up by the ocean.
Ozzy should know anyways, because we create a hole in the ozone. We've been talking about it for years over here. And you go to Australia, and that's where the hole went.
The hole is...
Like people in America do not understand what it's like to be underneath the Australian sun. It is not the same. It does not feel the same. You walk outside. I've never been sunburned so fast. Never in my life as I was in Australia. In the news, some unpleasant news with a large impact on the Marvel Cinematic Universe on Monday, which was, I don't know, a week.
Yesterday, as we record this, whatever it is, as you hear
weeks
this.
And weeks ago in my life, many things have happened.
Right. Yeah.
Years of trauma all in one day. Jonathan Majors, who plays Kang in all of his variants in the multiverse saga of the MCU, was convicted on one count of misdemeanor harassment and one count of misdemeanor assault. He was found not guilty of two higher charges. But immediately after his conviction, he was dropped by his talent agency and publicity firm, pulled from a major ad campaign for the U.S. Army, as well as a deal with the Texas Rangers baseball team, and dropped from his next film, and Marvel has now severed ties with him. Avengers: The Kang Dynasty is still scheduled to release in 2026 at the moment, but I don't think so. But obviously there will be changes of some sort to Marvel's plans, whether that means recasting the character of Kang or moving away from Kang as the main antagonist altogether at this point. Recast him.
I suppose.
I understand that maybe people have will have a distaste for the whole thing, but honestly, and there's going to be apologists and other people who are going to complain that this is an overreaction or whatever. I don't think so. I think that this is exactly right. I think this is exactly what we should be doing.
Basically, yeah, none of the places and companies that have dropped him did so prior to the conviction. They were like, if you found not guilty across all counts, they were ready to proceed. 2 convictions out of 4. They're like, that's it. Talk about, like, he was on such a huge upswing career-wise. He was all over the place. Creed 3, throughout the Marvel Universe. What was that? Lovecraft Country. That was, he's leading that on HBO. I mean, it's just, there were oodles of things that he was doing, and just seeing that all just evaporate like this. I suppose that's supposed to be the what do you call it? Prompt you not to do bad things.
Well, and somebody's going to call it cancel culture or whatever, that sort of thing. But it's not. It's just consequences. It should be. It should be. That's the way it should be. If my kids do something wrong, they get in trouble. And sometimes they get things they want taken away, or they get excluded from things they wanted to do because they did something that was wrong. And when you do something wrong as an adult, it doesn't make any difference how popular you are or how how talented you are. And we have been excusing people of talent,
sure have,
Roman Polanski, for years because of their talent, as somehow that makes it okay, or we can separate the art from the artist and that sort of thing. It's not okay. And then honestly, when something like this happens, if you don't look back on your own life and go, ugh, I wonder if I did anything like that. You should be doing that. You should be doing that.
Self-examining, yes.
And
not
thinking
doing
about
the bad
your
things,
own life.
Self-examining. Yeah.
Yes, self-examining, figuring out what mistakes you've made, because we all have. We've all made mistakes, and hopefully we've atoned for them. And if we haven't, then we should. And as as much as I love Marvel, and I love the Marvel, for the most part, like the Marvel movies and all that. No one should be above repercussions for doing bad things, and it's never okay.
No, being cast in a large role is no excuse for breaking the law. Not to spoil anything about Loki season 2 for you, but as I already mentioned before, like they definitely have outs in the way that Loki season 2 played out, for moving away from Kang entirely or altering who Kang is played by. Those are built into the way Loki season 2 wrapped up. So there certainly are writing ways that they can get out of this, and they will, in one way or another. They will. So There it is.
So on a happier note, if you own a Meta Quest 2, 3, or Pro VR headset and you subscribe to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, you can now update your headset to the latest Quest firmware and enjoy the Xbox Cloud Gaming Beta. Nope, I cannot, because I'm not doing that.
Right.
The games are not in VR. You will play them on a virtual 2D display, and you can pair an Xbox controller, a PS4 DualShock, or a Nintendo Switch Pro controller with PS5 DualSense support in the works. DualSense support in the works. I said that right. So far, the latency while streaming your Xbox games from Microsoft Cloud Game Server seems to be around 100 milliseconds from button click to display response. Well, that's not noticeable at all, which is significantly more than the threshold at which most people start feeling nauseated in VR. Under 15 milliseconds is generally the target. But again, these aren't actual VR games, so as long as you keep your head and eyes as still as possible, you're probably okay on that front, I guess. Yeah.
Once the display starts moving against the virtual background, and then you're noticing that you click the button and nothing happens for 100 milliseconds, it can start to get a little queasy in there. So maybe don't play your high-paced racing games.
Yeah, I will say, in case you hear anything, there are workers in the house. They are finishing up painting in the home theater and doing things in the home theater, and the dogs are in their crates, and she may go crazy. So last week when I complained about that or warned about it, they never showed up that day. I guess they were waiting for materials, and that's why we never heard anything. Let's get on to the questions here.
Yeah.
Jeff is interested in the 4K HDR capable projector upgrade. He's currently using a Vivitech D862 on the 100-inch screen. No plans to change the screen or 11-foot throw. At the moment, he's got an Apple TV 4K and a Yamaha RX A2030 receiver with a 7.1 speaker setup using monitor audio Silver Series speakers all around. He'd love to give a 97-inch OLED, but that's a wee bit over his budget at the moment. He's looking to keep the price around the $2,000 mark, and there's a bit of wiggle room in the budget, but that's the ballpark figure. He'd also like to purchase it from Best Buy if possible. He shared some photos of his room. He does have blackout curtains, and they mostly watch in the evening when it's darker outside anyways. He's not a gamer, so what do we recommend? He wants $2,000. He wants a 4K HDR capable projector upgrade. Yep. So, I mean, that's usually what the Epson UB50, whatever, 40, 30, 50.
So I mean, normal price on the 5050
it's like $2,500 though, is right?
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, the retail price these days is $3,000. Now, I did see it on sale at Best Buy. We're talking about the Epson 5050 UB here. I did see it on sale at Best Buy for $2,400, which is over the budget that he said, but maybe within striking distance. Found it recently for $2,550 at Amazon, but at Best Buy at the time that we're recording this, it's back up to its $3,000 price point. So, I mean, the thing is, the reason we're talking about this projector that in all cases that we found it is over the $2,000 budget that he mentioned is because it is a significant performance jump over anything less expensive with the Epson 5050 UB. The black levels and contrast that it provides, its HDR tone mapping, which is not frame by frame, but it has a 16-step slider that you can adjust if you happen to find the movie that you're watching a little bit too dim or too bright overall. There's a very easy 16-step adjustment that you can make there, but its tone mapping in general is quite strong. So it's mainly the black levels and contrast. It's well above in that performance area anything else that you might get for the same price or less. Then its lens is a cut above as well. Huge zoom range, huge vertical and horizontal lens shift range, and all of it motorized with memory functions if you happen to be doing changing aspect ratios on your screen. So there's just plenty of features that the 5050 UB from Epson offers that you won't find in the same price or less expensive projectors. It is a 1080p native resolution projector, but it will wobble its frames twice, wobble its panels twice per frame to give you half 4K actual resolution, but honestly, you cannot see the difference, and then its HDR support is there as well, so it will take a 4K 60 HDR signal. So if you're willing, wait a little bit, it'll go on sale again, and you're willing to go a little bit over that $2,000 budget, then that is...
If you're willing to not buy it from Best Buy, the refurbished price on Epson.com, which I think they're out of stock right now, but
probably
you can keep an eye on that. It's like $2,200, so it's only $200 over.
Yeah, so it's within striking distance for sure. So if any of those features that I talked about are really enticing to you, for me it would be the black levels and the contrast without question. That's the main thing I'm concerned with. Then that is still going to be our top recommendation because it's like within the realm of possibility for that price range. But if you're like, nope, $2,000 is a hard line and I cannot go over that, I would point you in that case to BenQ's HT3560, which retail price on that is $1,600. So it's definitely going to be under the $2,000 mark. You can very often find it for $1,500 instead of $1,600. Now, it did replace the HT3550. So I'm talking about the HT3560, and there was a significant performance improvement going from the 3550 to the 3560. It is worth your while to go with the newer 3560. It is DLP based. It is native 1080p panels, but they are wobbled 4 times per frame, so you actually get all of the 4K resolution reaching your eye. They improved the contrast quite significantly, quite noticeably. If you put a 3550 beside a 3560 and fire them up, you will see the contrast difference. It is not difficult to spot. The black levels are still DLP black levels. They're not as good as the 5050 UB. They certainly don't touch a JVC or a Sony or an OLED or anything like that, but for the price point, they are about as good as it gets. And then the part where BenQ has a real advantage over its competition of similar price points is their color accuracy is definitely a cut above. They do a very good job with their color wheels and DLP color accuracy. And so the HD3560, I really like that model. If you want to be right around $1,500 instead of $2,500, which is a significant difference in price to be sure, I don't think you can really do better than the 3560. And coming from your Vivitech that you have now, if you never see the 5050 UB in your room, if you just go from there to the BenQ HD3560, I am very confident saying that you will consider that a noticeable upgrade for sure. If you go to the 5050 UB and compare that to the 3560, you'll be like, oh, the UB 5050 UB is even better, but if you never see it, put that out of your mind, then it's not as though the HD3560 in any way would be a questionable upgrade from your Vivitech. So those would be my recommendations.
So will his Yamaha RX A2030 pass through 4K 60 with HDR? If not, what will be needed to get everything working? And I'm pretty sure the answer to that is no, and he's going to need some sort of splitter or whatever you call it, extractor or whatever. Yeah,
Tom is correct. The Yamaha A2030 is old enough that it will not pass through 4K 60 with HDR, which either the 5050 UB or the BenQ HD3560 can accept. Neither of those can accept 4K 120, but they can accept 4K 60 with HDR. So you will want to have a device that takes the input of whatever 4K 60 HDR source you are using, and that is HDMI 2.0. You don't have to worry about HDMI 2.1. That is 18 gigabits per second is entirely sufficient for that, and HDMI 2.0 is entirely sufficient for 4K 60 with HDR. So, I mean, we've talked about the HD Fury devices in the past, and they can definitely do that, but for a fairly high price, a couple $100 plus. So, thankfully, O-Ray, O-R-E-I, that brand, O-Ray, they have a device which is HDMI 2.0, not 2.1, 18 gigabits per second, not 40 or 48, but for your purposes works perfectly fine. They have that device. They sell it themselves. It's the HDA 927. It has a single HDMI input on its front, and then it has two HDMI inputs on the back. One of them is video, one of them is audio only, and that is exactly what you need to do, is separate the video from the audio. The video output can still accept an ARC or eARC signal if you are plugging this into a flat panel. Not going to be a concern on a projector, but it will work for a flat panel if you're doing that. So that goes for $68 directly from O-Ray, and I have seen it for about $50 on Amazon. At the moment we're recording this, Amazon was out of stock and O-Ray Direct was not, but yeah, you're in that $50 to $70 range. It's not going to break the bank, so that would be a great way to solve this issue.
All right, Frank and Nina. Frank and Nina have a 2-channel system set up in their sunroom, which is usually like a screened-in porch, and which has been enclosed. So it was a screened-in porch, or it was just a porch, which is screened in, and then they put walls. That's what we sometimes. I mean, I don't know what they're calling a sunroom, but that's what we call it around here. They have a full 7.2 surround sound system for their TV room. This 2-channel system is just for music listening. They're using a pair of Macintosh SL6 towers, speakers running full range, powered by a Macintosh MX130 preamp, connected via XLR cables to a matching Macintosh MC7300 amplifier. The sources are a Weem Pro streaming audio box and a Marantz CD player, both connected via RCA cables. I mean, there's your problem right there, the RCA.
Definitely not.
Whatever the problem is, the solution is XLR.
Oh, sure.
Frank has been to see an audiologist, and unfortunately, he has some hearing loss. Welcome to the wonderful world of aging. Mm-hmm. It also, if you're a concert goer when you were young, it's people when you're young, you don't think about it. I was fortunate in that I didn't really like going to concerts all that much, and I didn't have that many opportunities, so my hearing loss is minimal based on that.
There can be other reasons for hearing loss too, though. So yeah,
work-related hearing loss is also very common,
and it can be illness-related or genetics-related. Many factors can go.
My mom has some hearing loss that is genetic. Mm-hmm. She just can't hear certain sounds. It starts to dip around 4 kilohertz and gets worse above there. At this point, it isn't severe, so compensating for his hearing loss is a possibility. He'd like to know if there's an equalizer they could use with the system that will allow him to boost these higher frequencies and easily adjust them, but then easily bypass the equalizer when Nina is using the system, what we recommend. I mean, that's literally a multi-band equalizer that you just put in between the amp and the
preamp.
The preamp.
Which, thankfully, in your case, would be quite easy to do because you do have the amplification separate from the preamplification. So this will go in between those two devices. Now, I did want to mention Macintosh, not that long ago, introduced their own graphic EQ, which lacked the graphic part of the graphic EQ, and then did a completely unacceptable thing, in my opinion, which was that the front panel of it lit up green instead of Macintosh blue, and I can't fathom why they did that for any reason whatsoever. It was very expensive. I think it was in the $3,000 range or something like that. So I mentioned it because you've got all Macintosh equipment. You might be thinking that Macintosh for equalization is what you want to do. There's just no way I can in good conscience recommend it for the green color of the panel alone. I think is reason enough to avoid it. I don't know why Macintosh did that, but that aside, it's a ridiculously overpriced thing. So I am going to point you at a standard multi-band EQ from a company called Art Pro, which is like a professional company. I use them for my microphone preamplifier into my computer, and those are the types of products that they make. They have their EP355, which is a dual channel, so that just means stereo, 31 bands per channel, so you've got lots of adjustment capability in there. It is, that makes it 1/3 octave, which is pretty good. Normally, when we smooth out any measurements that we take, we do it at 1/3 octave so that we don't have a bunch of extraneous humps and dips that don't really matter too much. So this is pretty good filter resolution, particularly for just your standard graphic multiband EQ. It has 2 different gain settings. So the amount that you move the little switches on this multiband EQ, you can choose whether that's ±6 decibels or ±12 decibels. So if you need to apply more correction, you have the ability to do that. If you need more granular fine correction, you can do that with the lower gain setting. And
it
then
has a bypass button.
It's got a handy little bypass button right there that's labeled bypass. So that doesn't get much more simple than that to know what you're doing. Independent level controls for each channel. So if you start being able to hear better out of your left ear than your right, or vice versa, you can make that adjustment on this device as well, and then bypass it all with the push of a button. So quite easy. On the back of it, you do have both RCA and XLR, as well as 1/4 inch balanced inputs as well. But you've got the XLR inputs that you're already using. I will just caution you, though, make sure you look at the diagram that they have right there on the back of this EQ for the exact pin configuration for those XLR connections, and make sure that the 3-pin connection actually lines up pin for pin with the pin connections that your Macintosh equipment uses, because that is not a guarantee with XLR connections. Not every XLR connection has the pin layout for which one is ground and which one is signal and which one is minus. They aren't all exactly the same. Sometimes you need an adapter cable that just switches those around so that the correct pin is connected to the correct pin on each piece of equipment.
I like to have a ground lift switch on the back too, which is nice.
Ground lift as well, so if there's any hum that comes in through your electrical circuitry, you can get rid of that with the flip of a switch. So it is $240, which is going to be well less expensive than anything in your Macintosh equipment that you might have been looking at. You might think that it's so much less expensive, how can it possibly be any good? It's fantastic. It's a fantastic graphic EQ. It is truly all you need, every feature you asked for, and I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, I do like this, and the thing is I like about it is it's got those little sliders, which that's like a flat blast from the past for me. You would just leave everything below 4K alone. There's 4K, 5K, 6.3, 8, 10, 12 and a half, 16, and 20, and you just make a nice little whoop. Swoop
but I mean, heck, he's running tower speakers full range. He might find that some EQ in the bass is beneficial as well. He doesn't have any hearing loss down there, but it might be beneficial to the sound quality. So it gives you that ability too.
Yeah. Only problem is if you do that, then the bypass might not be what you want to do. You'd have to remember where your slider settings and then even them all out from when your wife is in the room, sort of thing. So I don't know. It might be get 2 of them.
That's
One just for the bass and one just for the treble, and you bypass the treble.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, you'd wire them. You know, they basically all go in the line. That would work. So you'd spend twice the amount, which is 240 times 2, so $580.
$480, under $500. Yeah,
$500 with tax and shipping and everything else. And then you put 2 of these in the line, one just for the bass, one for just for the treble, or one for everything basically, and then one just for the treble. Yeah, and then you bypass the treble one whenever your wife's in the room.
Whenever you don't want at that moment. Yeah,
and you're still saving thousands of dollars over the Macintosh version.
You sure are. Yeah, the Art Pro EQ355, and I think that checks all the boxes.
All right, Cesar. So with the Harmony Hub-based remotes getting harder and harder to come by, if he wants to move his equipment to a location outside of his home theater, what's the simple solution for controlling it these days? I mean, the Sofa Baton, which we have a review, and Andrew has updated. I told him he can stop now. He's done multiple updates over the first year of the life of this remote.
I think one last one at this point might be a decent idea. But,
well, maybe. I don't know if he's still using the dang thing. I think he is. And then we've written articles on how to control your AV gear from other rooms and that sort of thing. And I mean, obviously, it's just not easy. The simplest, in my mind, solution is getting something that has an app that allows you to do it that way.
I suppose, yeah. I mean, people have ragged on the Sofa Baton X1, but honestly, if what you want to do is control a home theater system, it is completely sufficient and decent at doing that. It's the people who wanted to completely replace a Harmony and do all of their home automation that Harmony allowed them to do. It is not as capable in those areas, and it's not as capable as a multi-room solution as Harmony was capable of being. But if what you want to do is control a single home theater and the home theater equipment inside of it with all of that stuff, stored outside of the room, and so you have the hub device that is out there with your equipment, and then you have your, wand, the actual remote that you hold in your hand that communicates via radio frequency with that hub device, and that hub device, similar to the Harmony Hub, has outputs on it that you can put the included IR extender blasters and more precision IR, lights that it has, so that if you have something hidden behind a cabinet door, you can run that extender to it, and that all works. That's built into the Sofa Baton X1 Hub as well. So that goes for $190, and honestly, that's probably the number one solution we can point you to. It's the pretty direct one, and don't be too put off by the reviews on Amazon. There's lots of negative reviews on Amazon. Don't be too put off by that in this case. This is a case
where we're going to say those are the same people that complain about they want the Snyder cut back. Don't listen to those people.
A lot of it was early stuff where there were a lot of growing pains with the X1. To be
I think
sure,
so. Yeah.
It's not that it is. Doesn't deserve criticism or that it can't get better. It definitely can get better, but don't be put off by looking at those early reviews for controlling a home theater. It's really quite adequate. Now, there are other options. If you are in the iOS family, you have an iPhone or an iPad, then there is the Roomy remote, which is all app-based, right? So you're using an iPhone or an iPad. You're not going to have any physical buttons if you do that. But the Roomy remote is a pretty darn good universal remote, and it works with a series of IR blasters as well. So you can have that control if you've got something that only works with IR. They've got their whole compatibility list, and you can get the IR blasters that work along with it. Now, there's a charge here. You can either do it as a monthly subscription. They basically have a one-room solution for $5 a month or $60 a year. Or if you want to control more than one room with your Roomy remote, they have a $10 a month or $100 a year subscription for that, unlimited devices in unlimited rooms. Or you can pay $250 once and just have it lifetime unlimited. So, fairly steep price there, more than the cost of the Sofa Baton X1. But if you want a fully app-based, iOS-based solution, then Roomy Remote could be that for you. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the brand Universal Remote Control. Their Total Control Lite solution is really all that you would need in your instance, and there's a plethora of different products that you can use there. Now, they are custom installer based, right? You typically go through a custom installer to purchase any of these things, but Universal Remote Control is more expensive than anything we've talked about here, but not as expensive as, say, an entire Crestron or Control 4 system. So they sort of go into that middle ground, which might be a solution there. And then I did want to mention, you'll want to trial this and see if it can work for you. But the Amazon Fire TV Cube, specifically the Cube itself works as an IR blaster and can connect via Bluetooth and Wi-Fi to other devices in your system. So you've got this very simple Fire TV remote that you're using. They kind of rely on you using voice controls to make all of this work. But if you just have fairly standard known brand name devices, you can program your Amazon Fire TV Cube to control all of those things via IR or Bluetooth. And so it can be a solution there. And it works with a fair amount of home automation products as well, because it is its own Amazon Echo device as well. You can talk directly to the Fire TV Cube or through the voice remote to the Fire TV Cube, and it will interface that works with anything that works with an Amazon Echo device. So it can be a fairly reasonable solution to do things that way, but you'd want to look into it. Last one I'll mention, we actually talked about this when it was like either a Kickstarter or fundraising campaign. It was known as the YIO Remote 2 at that point. They've now rebranded as a brand, and they called themselves Unfolded Circle. So that's the brand name now, is Unfolded Circle, still calling this thing the Remote 2. It's on pre-order for €450. So this is a pricey solution. And at this point, it's a lot of promises without a lot of confirmation that everything they're promising actually works. It's certainly a nice physical looking remote. The charging base that it comes on works as a hub, so it's got the hub-based solution for it as well. But they're making a ton of promises about all the home automation integration that the Unfolded Circle, brand name now Remote 2, is going to do. And we don't have any confirmation that that's actually going to work at this point. So that's, at this point, kind of vaporware-ish. I don't want to say vaporware because it's pretty clear that this will hit the market. But yeah, it's very tough to recommend it as the solution right now, just because there's a lot of unknowns with it. But thought I'd mention it because if you're waiting anyway, then you might keep an eye on it and be like, oh, when it comes out, let's see how it actually goes.
Infinite Gary. On Gary's new 30 watts per channel pure... let's go back for a second.
Okay.
I wrote an article on AV Gadgets, and it's like, what is killing home theater? And more than anything, I think that the HDMI CEC promise that we would be able to control everything with any remote that we picked up is what has led to this current situation we're in. I think the people at Harmony, and we talked about this, the CEO came in and didn't care anymore about the remote business.
He pretty much said as much, yeah. Looked
at it and said, well, HDMI CEC is going to be a direct competitor. Why would we even bother with this anymore? And this is why we're in this situation with remotes and all that. They stepped out of the business, said this is not viable anymore. Yeah. HDMI CEC is going to make us obsolete.
I mean, in a way, to be fair, I don't even know if they got that far, because like the Harmony division and our keyboard divisions cost about the same, and the Harmony division makes about 1/100th the revenue of our keyboard division. So I think it was a pure business decision,
and that's
not
fine.
Actually unfair.
and that's fine from the standpoint, from that standpoint. And would we still be recommending Harmony remotes if they cost 10 times what they cost? And the answer is we wouldn't be. It would
be tough. That would be a real stretch, all right.
So, but the fact that HDMI CEC has never and seems like will never work properly, simply because of how it works. It works by automatically sensing what it thinks we want to be watching, which will never is never going to be correct. And here we are stuck in this stupid situation where, if you don't have a simple basic system that has one amp, I just wrote this article yesterday or the day before, one display, one amp, one source. Yep. And that amp could be in the sound bar, that amp could be in the AV receiver, doesn't matter. But if you have more than that, HDMI CEC is incapable of figuring out what the hell you want to do. Unless you have all the same brand, at which point you have a better chance.
Even then, not a guarantee.
Yeah. And then which brands can you have that make all of those devices? And the answer is Sony. That is it.
Sure,
Sony makes a TV, a receiver, and DVDs, Ultra HD players, and that sort of thing. You can't find that other than those all-in-one systems from Samsung, because they don't make receivers. So you got to get their all-in-one system that has a player embedded in it and everything else, which is back to a simple system. It's just... It's how we've ended up in this stupid situation where we used to be able to control everything with one thing, and now we can no longer do it. And I'm just as frustrated as everybody else is about this.
You mostly can with the Sofa Baton X1. Prepare yourselves for a little bit of frustration here and there and some learning curve, but it can get the job done.
Yeah. Infinite Gary. That's the other thing that pisses me off, is that people are going to complain about the Sofa Baton X1 as being not good enough. When I'm like, what's the not good enough compared to what? Because we don't have anything else, so you can't complain about the fact
frustration.
That this thing, it does it eventually, sort of, which is better than not doing it at all, which is what HDMI CC does, or doing its own thing, which is what HDMI CC does. Which is turning itself on in the middle of the night because something decided to check for an update, and now your entire system is playing, horror sounds from beyond the deep at 3 a.m. at 100 dB. Infinite Gary. On Gary's new 30 watts per channel pure Class A Sujden A21 SE amplifier, he noticed that it not only has huge heat seek fins running all the way along both sides and venting out the sides and top, but also has a venting cut into the bottom of the chassis with what amounts to an entirely metal base underneath all of the circuitry.
Yeah, Class A.
There are anti-resonance feet that raise the bottom of the chassis about 3/4 of an inch. He was initially thinking he'd stack the new amp on top of his SVS PB2000 Pro subs, but do all those vents at the bottom indicate there will be a substantial amount of heat coming from the bottom that can potentially damage the finish on the top of his subwoofer? Would putting a wood shelf plank on top of the sub and then sitting the amp on that be enough, or should he be looking for a dedicated amplifier stand? He found one that he likes that is 3 inches thick, plus has a 1-inch feet of its own, and the Sujden's owner manual does indicate that it should have 4 inches of clearance to any item beneath it. Then why don't they have 4-inch feet on the dang thing?
Yeah.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. First of all, heat rises.
Yeah.
So if you're putting it on top of something, the heat is going away from it, number one. Number two, this is a dumb product. That is dumb.
I mean, I think 30 watts per channel Class A, that is going to be a lot of heat.
Yeah, it's not going to be cool.
Boiling away.
Yeah.
No, and so all the venting on the bottom is for air inlet. It's to let air come in from the bottom. So, I mean, the last thing you would want to do is sit this Class A amplifier above your Xbox, or above your preamplifier even, that is venting its own heat out the top.
Right.
You don't want this amplifier above anything. For the amount of heat that it generates, you really don't want any other devices that need to draw in their own air above this amplifier. So this amplifier pretty much wants to be on its own. Now, if you sit it on top of a subwoofer, that's probably going to be fine.
Yeah.
Because that is not going to have a whole bunch of heat.
I might put a piece of plywood underneath it just to protect the finish, but you're not going to see this plywood getting like blackened. Yeah,
because it doesn't have like fans blowing the air down out the bottom. That's an air inlet. So yeah, I would say putting on top of your subwoofer is probably perfectly okay. Having a piece of wood in between just to protect the finish, just in case those feet heat up, because they very well, or like the rubber just melts and gets stuck to the top of your subwoofer, which seems not out of the realm of possibility with this thing. So yeah,
any product that says you need space underneath it and does not provide you a way of getting that space underneath it built into the product is dumb. You know what I mean? That's just dumb.
Don't put any heat generating thing beneath it. Don't put anything that needs to be cooled above it.
That's right. And wood is an insulator, so I mean it's not a great insulator, but it's better than wouldn't put a piece of aluminum down there, for example. Jonathan in the CDEN 4.5 312.
I've given it that name. I don't know if he's actually calling it that yet, but I think it should be by this point.
Jonathan's in a terrible situation. He's been happy with his theater for about 18 months now, and he honestly doesn't have any obvious upgrade in mind to spend money on. Whatever shall he do?
Yes.
I need a car.
None have suffered as much as Jonathan.
Poor Jonathan.
Satisfaction with his home theater. It's terrible.
He's down to only going out to movie theater about once a year now, just to remind himself and to support his local theater. I don't care about supporting large corporations. Thank you very much. The experience is just so much better at home. He did just replace the lamp in his Sony VW325ES projector for the first time since he bought it. It was getting close to about 2,500 hours, and the image was noticeably dimmer, so swapping out the bulb fixed that. He had his projector professionally calibrated shortly after he first bought it, and now that it has a brand new lamp, he's been advised by a few people online that it would be a good idea to get it calibrated again. Do we agree? No. After the first calibration,
to some extent, yes, you might.
After the first calibration, he stuck to watching things that they had been set in reference picture mode, and he thought the colors and details were indeed incredible. I almost said credible. The workers are like talking behind me. I don't know what's going on, but they're being very loud. But after living with it for a few weeks, he decided he truly preferred a slightly brighter overall image. Or image overall, whatever. So he kept the reference picture mode as it was, so he could always go back, and then manually copied all the settings to bright cinema picture mode himself and made some adjustments from there, and found a brighter overall setting to be to his liking ever since, at least for movies. For sports, mostly football and hockey, he's never been completely satisfied, so this time, if he brings in a professional calibrator once again, should he insist on setting the reference picture mode to his personal preference of a slightly brighter image overall? He has honestly never gone back to the dimmer reference mode that was first calibrated, and should he also insist on being in the room while they set a sports mode for him, since he is familiar with his Sony's picture settings now and has played around with them himself, but never managed to find a completely satisfying sports experience? What are our thoughts in general on all of this? So I will tell you what I would do. I would absolutely 100% leave my settings the way that I have them right now. Okay, to start with. And the reason is the first like 100 hours or so of this bulb, or maybe even a little bit less or more. Around
1 to 200 hour-ish range,
It's going to be different than what, it's going to kind of settle in. Basically break. I don't want to call it break in, but basically it's going to be a little bit brighter at first, and then it's going to kind of settle in.
Percentage wise, the greatest difference drop in light happens in those first 1 to 200 hours, and then it's much more gradual after that. So, I mean, honestly, if you were hiring a professional calibrator, any professional calibrator worth their salt, when you tell them what display they're going to be calibrating, would inform you, don't bother having me out until you've run your projector for 1 to 200 hours, and then I'll come out after that. So that can be a way to sort of vet your calibrator, because if they don't say that right away, then that's an indication that they're not the one to hire.
So first of all, I would just leave the settings as they are and live with the projector for a little bit. I think after that 1 to 200 hours or whatever it is, if you're looking at it and thinking something is amiss, then sure, get the calibrator back out. I don't love the idea of sitting in the room with them, mostly because from what I'm hearing, from what you're saying, you really kind of want to do it yourself. You really don't want them to do it. You want them to like verify that what you've done has not been that. You want them to give you kind of a baseline.
He's run into the one issue of he's played around with the settings and hasn't found a sports setting that he is totally happy with. So he's hoping that a professional calibrator might be able to adjust the settings to his liking. So he wants to be in the room while they do that, so he can say, yes, no, that's exactly what I want, or it isn't. And so there's a little bit of a not entirely do it yourself, because that's purely trial and error, right?
Yeah, it is. But I really feel like you are never going to be happy with a sports setting. And the reason is you're not watching sports on a disc that has been, to a certain extent, held to a standard. And whether or not they all follow that standard is immaterial. The discs themselves are, kind of required to hit certain benchmarks and all these other things, whereas you're streaming or you're watching via cable and the different quality. I mean, I've watched sports things that, from one even camera to the other, you get a completely different experience.
Sure.
And so I don't know what the problem you're experiencing is. You're like not really happy with it. I don't know if it's motion blur. I don't know if it's the brightness. I don't know if it's, whatever. But I don't know that there's enough of a consistency within one sports broadcast, much less between multiple different sports broadcasts on different channels and from different mediums, that you're going to be able to go, well, this is the one setting that works. I just don't know that that you're going to be able to do that.
Well, yeah, there's no guaranteeing it, but I would say so. I'm not against this. I'm not against you hiring the calibrator. Don't do it until you've had 200 hours of use, but they're going to tell you that anyway. Yeah, absolutely. Any of them should be happy to, at this point, have you in the room and go through it with them. If they absolutely insist that you not be in the room, then that's weird. At this point, you're the owner. You're the one hiring them, and you've been through a professional calibration before. So you're not the type who's going to say, oh, everything just looks too dim and be upset with them. Like, that's fine. You've been through this before. You know what you're in for. So I think everything with your plan is fine. I will just say you do have the option of spending about the same or probably less to get Portrait Display's brand new C7 color meter along with the Calman Home software. You can get that bundle for, I think it's $400, right? And you get the bundle of that software with that meter, which is a fantastic meter already pre-profiled at the factory for you. And so that cost, if you do want to delve into taking the measurements yourself and going through the Calman software yourself, then that could be the way that you spend that money. That could be the way you spend a little money on your home theater.
I think that's a better expenditure of your money than getting a professional calibrator in, because I think you would be happier if you did it yourself. Plus, it would distract you, and you would no longer. It would give you something to spend your money on, and then you would be distracted. And then instead of wanting to spend more money, you could just, I'm going to recalibrate. Rob asks, this is a different Rob, not this Rob. Why does Tom hate Xbox so much? I don't think that you've listened very closely to me, because I've said that I like the Xbox in so many ways, in many, many ways, except that they can't get audio right. And it's a very simple, this is a thing I care about that clearly Microsoft does not. There is no way, or they have just given up. I think more importantly, they have given up. They've said, the engineer, maybe there's a big, board meeting. They sat down, they said, okay, so the thing about the audio is that people are complaining about this, and the engineers say, well, we can do that, but if we do that, then you can no longer have this. And they say,
that is the major problem. So much of what they do depends on having to decode everything into PCM first, and then remux it together into a single stream, and then put it into whatever container bitstream output that the user has chosen. So in order to just have straight in, straight out from your source, pure bitstream bypass, you'd have to give up on all of your alert sounds and button click sounds and navigation sounds and all of that stuff. And sometimes people are like, yeah, I'm fine with all of that, except I do want to get my alert. When my friend logs on, I still want that. It was like, you want that one thing? You got to go back to decoding everything into PCM and then remuxing all the streams and then putting it in a container. Like, there's no way around it. So I see where they're coming from.
I do see where they're coming from. Yeah. I just don't understand why they can't just say, listen, this is the compromise.
Yeah.
If you want to bitstream everything out, you're going to lose all the rest of these sounds. And I'd be like, 2 thumbs up, get it to me. But
Which
they won't.
They've kind of done at this point. They do have the full bypass setting now. It just doesn't work for everything. And
therein lies the problem. Okay, right. And therein lies why I still hate my Xbox. Because really, this is the real issue is that all I do is use it to stream. It's a complete waste. I should just use my Roku, right? Because I have a Roku Ultra. I should use it. I don't, because it doesn't have Twitch. Well, and that drives me crazy, because I don't watch Twitch that often anymore. I used to watch it like all the time. It was like my wife would go to bed, I'd turn on Twitch, and I watch people play games, and it's just like reliving my college days, my high school and college days. But now I've kind of gotten away from it, and believe me, when I go back to set up the home theater, there's a very good chance that Xbox is going to be taking a back seat, and I'm going to be on the Roku instead. But we will see. We will see. So I mean, I don't necessarily. I mean, I don't hate it or love it any more than the PlayStation, if that makes you feel any better. It just drives me nuts that they can't get the audio right. Right for me is, I guess, a more correct term. Mike appreciated our discussion about his Panasonic plasma that still turns on and shows its logo, but then goes to a bunch of blue lines and horizontal black lines whenever he tries to view anything on any of his HDMI inputs. He says he's never even thought of trying to call Panasonic about it since it's so old at this point, but he will do so. You never know. They might have a relatively inexpensive fix. That is almost as optimistic as my car making it out of this thing and
Sure.
not costing me thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. But if that doesn't work out, he wants to have some replacement ideas in mind. OLED. The plasma was actually a 65-inch, and it was mounted above a fireplace in an upstairs family room. There's often quite a bit of light in that room, and the plasma never really dealt with that the best. It was okay, but both he and his wife would appreciate less glare and reflections. If the replacement TV has super thin bezels, he could probably fit a 75-inch. His gear is actually down in the basement, so he ran HD-Base-T, and that has actually worked very well for the last 6 years. Supposedly, HD-Base-T adapters he already has installed can support 4K and HDR, although he's never been tested. In his case, they would not support eARC, though, and he'd need to get a new HD-Base-T adapter to support that. His wife has shown interest in getting Samsung's The Frame TV, mostly for its completely matte screen, but Matt isn't totally sold on it. It doesn't really seem like it's the best performing TV. That is an understatement, particularly for how expensive it is, and dealing with its one Connect box would actually be a bit of a pain in his case. So might we suggest a TV as a replacement? If he's being honest, he doesn't want to put too much money into this. He's still willing to repair the Panasonic plasma if it can be done affordably. So with all that in mind, what's our advice? My advice is that you're going to end up replacing that plasma because it's going to be more expensive to fix than it is going to be to get a new TV.
Well, yeah, and given the price points I'm going to talk about, it's really not outlandish to replace that TV.
Yeah, and this doesn't sound like a primary, like it might be your primary TV, but it's not like a primary TV, if you know what I mean. It's
like critical viewing TV. Yeah, that doesn't seem to be what this is. Yeah.
So in this case, the non-reflective surface, the less reflective surface. Let's be honest here. There's no such thing as a non-reflective surface, but the less reflective, the matte finish on the surface is important. It doesn't sound like viewing angles are a huge deal for you because it sounds like you're sitting directly in front of it. And I think that brightness is more important. So we are going to be pointing you towards like an LCD solution here. And Rob is going to tell you what that is right now.
Yeah, I think I can thread the needle on this pretty well by pointing you at Hisense's U7K series. The 65-inch of that is going for $700 right now. The 75-inch is going for $900 right now. So that's where I'm like, yeah, the cost of repairing that plasma might be getting right up to that $500, $600 mark, at which point size for $700, you can get a brand new 4K 120 HDR capable TV that does a nice 1100, 1200 nits that your plasma can't come remotely close to matching. In SDR mode, it's got a nice 400 to 500 nits, which is, going to overcome most of the glare in any well-lit room. And then specifically the U7K, even more than the more expensive U8K, the U7K has a semi-matte screen. It's not fully matte like Samsung's The Frame, but it's a semi-matte screen that honestly does a very nice job of cutting down reflections. It doesn't have any of that weird rainbow spread that a lot of Samsung's anti-glare screens have when light hits it. It does a really nice job, honestly, with any sort of reflections in that. So I quite like the U7K as a solution for a bright room. This also sounds like you probably are just using the TV's built-in speakers, the way that you were talking about it. And the U7K, I mean, obviously it's not the last word in, great fidelity, but it has pretty decent built-in speakers for a flat panel TV. Quite a bit better than the competition at the same price for sure, and quite a bit better than a lot of more expensive TVs. It's not bad for the built-in sound with it. So that's a consideration as well. And then if one of the things that your wife was drawn to with Samsung's The Frame is its ability to just look like artwork when it is not showing video, well, the Hisense U7K can actually do that too. It has an ambient mode, which is like an automatic screensaver, which it pulls its own art down from a library that it has stored online, and it can just go through that like a screensaver slideshow, or you can link it to your Google account because it runs Google TV as its interface. You link it to your Google account, and now it can show photos from your Google Photos library if you've stored them in the cloud through Google Photos. And you can show your own photos that way as a completely ambient art mode. And it looks great when it does it. So if that was the selling point of the Frame, the Hisense can actually do the exact same feature.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
And the Frame sucks.
Yeah, it's not a good TV.
It's not a good TV. Like a lot of people like, I've got this thing, and the box, the box broke, or they couldn't mount it totally flush because the bays were smaller than they expected, or motion doesn't look that good on it, and you're like, it sucks.
Yeah. And the U7K, full array local dimming. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at what a good TV it is for like $700.
Dazz. A member of one of the Facebook groups at Dazz Frequency asked for a complete 2-channel setup for listening to vinyl all in for $1,000. Dazz suggested a Marantz receiver, a Sen CBM 170 SE speakers, and an Audio-Technica LP60X turntable, which meant he ran out of money for a subwoofer. What would be our recommendation? I just read this question, so I got
That's
nothing.
Right. So I'm
go
prepared.
ahead. What you got, Rob?
You can see if you want to adjust. I'm going to stick with the same turntable that you recommended, Audio-Technica's AT-LP60X. You can find it for $130 over at B&H Photo. So that helps with the budget. Fully automatic turntable, pleasure to use, sounds great, has every method of connecting that you might possibly need. So you don't need a phono preamp, but if you have one, it can work with a phono preamp too. So great unit there for $130. I'm going to suggest for a speaker package going over to RSL and picking up their CG3M 2.1 system, mainly because it has my favorite $400 subwoofer by a country mile in that Speedwoofer 10S. There's nothing else at $400 that comes close to that RSL Speedwoofer 10S. Great subwoofer. Be happy to use that with anything, and then you get it paired up with their CG3 bookshelf speakers for $660. You can get that package. They actually have them in stock right now because boy, oh boy, do those sell out all the time. But as we're saying this, you can get that 2.1 package from RSL. So there we go. You put those two things together, and we're just under $800. So if you go over to accessories for less, you can get a nice AV receiver. I'm pointing you to Yamaha's RXV385. Has basic YPOW, so that's better than any of the standalone stereo amplifiers you're going to get at this price. $200 from accessories for less. With a subwoofer output, with bass management, HDMI inputs as well if you want to plug in other things. And so there you go. I think that checks all the boxes, and we fit under $1,000. Done.
There you go. Sounds great. Do that. Dazz used to be in IT for work. He left that career path a couple of years ago, but one of the things he used to set up for commercial clients at the time were 2x2 video walls where 4 flat panel displays were stitched together to form one image, albeit with visible seams forming a cross pattern in the middle. He knows Samsung is out there selling the wall with its modular micro LED panels with as close to no seams as, at all as possible, but TV bezels seem to be getting thinner all the time. So why isn't this a thing for the home market yet? Surely one of the big TV manufacturers could get the screen frame down to basically nothing and then allow home users to assemble 4 TVs to one giant display. I mean, what could be better than convincing regular consumers to buy 4 TVs at once? The bezel just isn't there yet. I mean, there's not really a bezel-less TV.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Samsung's very, very flagship 8K TV, I think it was, in Europe specifically, was like getting real close to no bezel at all. It's like just a aluminum frame right around the very edges, but still not zero bezel, right? If you still put 4 of those as physically close as you could, you would still have a cross pattern. It wouldn't be truly seamless. You do have to get down to a dedicated modular display like the wall with its micro LED panels to get truly seamless. But there are people who do this in their houses. There are people who have the 2x2 video walls, particularly a lot of sports fans do that already. So it's not that it isn't a thing whatsoever. It's just that if somebody wants a completely seamless, instead of this being 4 55-inch TVs or 4 65-inch TVs, and I can tell that it's 4 TVs that were just assembled to be as close to each other as possible, but there is still that cross that goes through my image. To eliminate that entirely is just literally not possible to do at this point unless you go for the wall. So that's why it isn't a thing that way, but it is a thing. There are people who have those in their homes.
There you go.
Yeah.
I scrolled. He still has a second row of seats in his basement home theater sitting on top of an old box spring with a couple of pieces of OSB on top to make it a platform. The housing market is such they're staying put for the foreseeable future. So now that he's found a reliable contractor that he trusts, he'd like to get a proper seating riser made. He's trying to nail down exactly how high it should be. His niece recently took second place in a video production contest, and he is not going to be humble about it. That won their whole household box seats to their high school state championship game. He knows the stadium seats were separated by 2 7 3/4-inch steps, so each row was 15.5 inches higher than the row in front of it. The sight lines were really comfortable that way, so wondered if it'd also be correct for his theater. He has a drop tile ceiling, so it's a bit less than 8 feet from floor to ceiling. If he ever drywalls the basement ceiling, it'll be 8 feet. So what would we say is a good height for his seating riser? It really depends on the height of your couch to a certain extent, and how tall
and then how high you mount your screen as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that 16 inches is like a good, I think, safe.
Well,
bet.
I mean, that is stadium seating. That is, IMAX seating, that raked stadium seating thing, which gives you the very clear sight lines. But I mean, keep in mind that at a high school football game, you're looking down at the field, where you don't necessarily. I mean, in a full-on IMAX theater, if you want to see the bottom of that IMAX screen, you're looking down as well. So that's why they have the taller rake. But if you're doing a normal 16:9 screen and you have the screen mounted a little bit higher, closer to the ceiling, top edge closer to the ceiling, you don't necessarily need a full 15.5 or 16 inches for the seating riser. So in a regular 8-foot ceiling room, a 16-inch riser is just acceptable because you don't really want the ceiling clearance to be less than a door frame, and that's 6'8". So if you do 16 inches in an 8-foot room, that's exactly what you'd have. So that's like just acceptable. But like we say, you don't really probably need that much. Honestly, for most applications, a foot. 12 inches works really well for home theaters because you aren't typically having to look down that much even to see the bottom of the screen, unless you've gone for a 4:3 screen or something like that to really mimic that IMAX presentation. So, I mean, I would say that a foot is very safe, and even with your slightly lower drop tile ceiling, it shouldn't be a problem for head clearance either. So I think that strikes the right balance.
Yeah, I can get behind that.
Yeah.
With so many people constantly coming in and going from their house, they make do with various forms of third row seating as best they can. Eventually, they hope to buy another house, the room big enough to comfortably fit the entire extended family. So going into hypothetical territory, if you went 3 rows of 4 seats each or 3 rows of 5 seats each, what would be the ideal dimensions of the room in our opinion? Mm-hmm. He'd be willing to have a walkway on only one side of the seat, so some of the sidemost seats would be compromised, but they wouldn't always be in use anyways, and he'd like his primary seat to be in the second row and provide a 45-degree field of view. So what dimensions would make all of that work? Remember, the width from back to back of your couch should be about 6 feet. So if you're having...
Ideally. I mean, 5.5 is like the minimum.
Yeah.
From
so let's
the back
go
of
6,
one seat to the back of
right?
the next.
So if you have 3 rows of seats, then you have for the front of your couch to the back of your couch, however far that is, right? Mm-hmm. Plus 6 feet. Plus 6 feet. So that's 12 feet plus that couch. So say the couch is like 3 feet, 4 feet. So
no, I mean, it's 6 feet from the back of one couch to the back of the other couch. That's
right, but your first row, you still have to take into account
what's in front of the first
what's in
row,
front of the back of the thing. So that alone is giving you, 6 feet is 12 feet plus that. So let's say 15, 16 feet. That's just if your seats are smack dab, your back row is the back of the wall, and then your front row is to the beginning of your front row.
But he was thinking like the second row would be the primary row, the front row gets a bigger than 45-degree field of view.
Right.
So that helps there.
Right.
So I'm like, if I started with the width, right, if I look at what's going to be a comfortable 4-seating across, which is like, 2 love seats across, you don't necessarily want just like a 4-seater couch with no arms. Or if you're doing a 5-seater, maybe that's, seat, 3-seater couch, or a couple of love seats and a captain's chair in the middle or something like that. But basically, if you go for sort of like the space saver, narrower recliners, and you start with that with 4 of those in a comfortable configuration, I think the least width you might have is about 115 inches, 101.5 inches. And then for 5 seats across comfortably, even if you put a little curve in there or a captain's chair or something like that, about 150 inches in width if you're doing 5 seats across. So then you'd want like a minimum of a 3-foot walkway to the side of that, up to, there's a 3-foot walkway on either side, or potentially even more. But a 3-foot walkway on either side is very comfortable. So that leads me to say that I want to have a room that's in the range of like 13 feet minimum for the width, up to about 19 feet would be very comfortable for the width. So 5 seats across could fit very comfortably in a 19-foot wide room. So we're in the range of 13 to 19 feet. Something like that could work width-wise. 4 seats across in the narrower room and 5 seats across in the wider room. And then, based on what you said there, I would suggest going with a 135-inch screen and sitting 11 to 12 feet eyes to screen in your primary row. That's going to give you the field of view that you're after with a 135-inch screen. So then there's going to be a row in front of that, and maybe that's a reduced row. It's a beanbag chairs or closer to the ground, something like that. And then have that third row, like we were saying, a minimum of 5.5 to 6 feet behind the second row. And we're still going to give that seat a 32-degree field of view. We're still going to be SEMPTE recommendation for that third row. It's still going to be a nice experience watching movies and TVs in that third row. It's not going to be ridiculously small. So that leads me to a room that's at a minimum of about 21 feet long, and 23 feet would be very comfortable. 23 feet would be long enough that you could have surround backs and even the third row wouldn't be distracted by them. So I'm saying on the larger side would be like 19 by 23. On the smallest side, I would probably be 13 by 21. Those are the dimensions I came up with.
All right. That's a lot of math. I'm not doing that. We've all made note of the unstable streaming video landscape. We can't count on every movie and show we want to watch remaining available or unedited. And we can't even count on digital purchases such as Discovery and PlayStation, as they just proved. Yeah. So he buys the Ultra HD Blu-ray whenever possible, but he was intrigued by the comment, the movie industry always seems to follow whatever's happening in the music industry with a lag about 5 to 10 years. I haven't seen that comment, but I'll take your word for it. And if he thinks about how he listens to music, he hasn't bought anything in years at this point. If he wants to support a particular band, he tries to see their show live, or he buys their merch. And if he wants to buy their music, he does so via Apple, so he can download the file and store it locally. So, is that where movies and TV shows are headed? We have Kaleidoscape today, but could another larger, more ubiquitous provider start offering lossless movie downloads? It seems like Apple could do it at any time if they want. What do we think? Okay, so the problem here with making this comparison is that in the music industry, there are studios, which are an entity, right? There's this entity. And then there's the artist, which is the creator of it. And movies are, I think, and TV shows and stuff like that are much more complex animals. And there's more stakeholders involved. And I would be surprised if we ended up in 5 or 10 years or even more than that with with like Pandora or Spotify for movies. I'm not saying it can't happen. I don't necessarily know that we really want it to happen to a certain extent, because we've seen what happens with movies like in Disney and Star Wars in particular, where they decide, we could even look at Marvel, for example. They've had this Jonathan Majors thing, right? They could, in theory, go back and reshoot with a different actor and change everything that's happened.
Or if what they want to just get AI to remove him and replace him with a different face.
That's right. They could do that. And do we really do we really want that? Do we really want there not to be any
Dazz is saying
permanence?
he definitely doesn't, so he wants to be able to own the thing in some form or fashion. Have it stored himself so that it can't be altered and taken away like that. So, I mean, music is a little bit different in that, like, they're well aware that music has to be portable. It has to be something that you can take with you, even if you don't have an internet connection. So that's why they're like, we have to offer a way to download or listen to music offline. And that just sort of got ingrained. And now if you try to take that away from people, it's going to be a losing battle, right? People are going to be really upset if you fully take that away. As long as there's somebody willing to do it, people will make that change. With movies, it's like, we're definitely watching movies more portably now than we ever have before, but it is still a little bit more of a, you're going to kind of sit and watch it somewhere. You're going to be a little bit more grounded, a little less on the move than you're going to be when listening to music. So the idea of, you're always going to have an internet connection when you're watching a movie or be in a place where you can, versus having to offer it as a download. I don't know. Like, the movie studios have never wanted you to be able to own a movie. They were dragged kicking and screaming into that. It's just the revenue stream on DVDs when it came out was so high that their eyes all lit up and they all went for it. But they have never wanted you to be able to watch a movie. They want you to pay them $20, $25, $30 every single time you watch the movie or a portion of the movie. They have always thought that that's what movies are worth. They always think that every single viewing should be an individual ticket purchase for every single viewer, and they are never going to back away from that. That's where they want to get to, and they're getting closer to it now, so they're all salivating at the idea that they can own the content themselves. You never get to own it, and you have to pay every single time you want to watch it, or at very least pay them an ongoing subscription so that even if you don't watch something, they still get money from you. So I don't know. This one, I don't think it's going to follow the music industry, because I just don't think that downloading movies in full quality has ever been a thing, like in a really ubiquitous way. So they're not taking it away from you the way the music industry would. So I don't really think that they're going to get there, because they never followed that path to begin with.
I would agree with that. Ben in Australia. Ben has a setup that included a Sony 65-inch X95J TV with a Yamaha YSP 5600 sound projector and an HD Fury Vertex 2 that allowed him to split the audio from the video so he could still enjoy the highest quality of both. For sources, he has a Sony X800M2 Ultra HD Blu-ray player and an Apple TV 4K. The HD Fury Vertex 2 died and would no longer output an image. And he's also in a situation where there are always other people around, so blasting the Yamaha sound projector as loud as he would have liked was never really an option. As a result, he's taken to using the Apple AirPod Max over-ear headphones. They can wirelessly connect to his Apple TV 4K, and when they do so, they can provide spatial audio, which does a pretty decent job of mimicking Atmos. And he can also have two pairs of AirPod Max headphones connected at the same time, which is great since he does like to be able to watch a movie with someone else. Just doesn't have to hear them talk or laugh or breathe, which I can identify with.
Yeah.
He has used DVD Fab to back up some physical discs and the Infuse app on the Apple TV 4K to put them back from a hard drive. That allows him to use the AirPod Max headphones and still enjoy spatial audio that way, even for physical discs. But that whole backup process is a bit of a pain, so he'd like to know, or is there any way to make it easier? If they wanted to make it easier, they would have done it. Is there any way for him to just play his physical discs in a normal Blu-ray player, output them to some sort of AV receiver, and then use headphones to enjoy them in spatial audio? He's willing to get headphones other than the Apple AirPod Max, but the trick is getting it all to work with two pairs of headphones at the same time, not just one. Any suggestions?
Oh boy, is Tom going to grit his teeth at what I'm going to suggest.
I'm sure that's true. So there are, I believe we are moving towards this faster than you think. I think that TV manufacturers are already realizing that this is an issue.
Oh, connecting to Bluetooth headphones.
Yeah.
Directly from the TV.
I think that we are moving towards this, and AV receiver manufacturers, I think, are also going to be on board.
There is some of that Bluetooth output directly to headphones, yeah.
But to my knowledge, there's no way of doing two, like,
and
built
then with
in.
Also spatial audio processing.
Yeah.
Because the TVs tend to be stereo only.
Yeah.
So there is a suggestion. It's an Xbox.
Oh, Jesus, help us.
Yeah. Because the Xboxes, if you download and pay for the Dolby Access app, which is only $10, so that's not a crazy price to put on there, that lets you use Dolby Atmos for headphones. So it will do all the processing inside the Xbox to output it for the headphones. Now, you can connect up to 4 wireless headsets directly to the Xbox, so it has to be a 4 Xbox headset. And I would probably recommend, in your case, for some decent movie watching quality, like I'm a little bit reticent because they're not absolutely my favorite, but like SteelSeries Arctics 9X, their top flight, there are one of the better ones that is like built for Xbox, does this, and you can connect up to 4 of them to your Xbox, and they will all be able to use that Dolby Atmos for headphones processing. So that would be a direct way to do it. Or you can plug any pair of wired headphones with a 3.5 millimeter jack into an Xbox controller. And the Xbox controller acts as the wireless connection between the Xbox and your headphones, and you just plug your headphones into the Xbox controller, and you can do it that way. So if you already have some wired headphones that you're happy with, you could do it just with the Xbox controller. You get a second Xbox controller, and the person you're watching with can plug their headphones into that, or they can connect their own wireless built for Xbox headset.
I can't think of anything that would make a movie more enjoyable to watch than having to hold an Xbox controller in my lap the entire time.
Yeah. So you probably want to get the built for Xbox wireless headset. So that would do exactly what you're asking to do. You'd want to get the Xbox Series X that has the disc drive. You wouldn't want to get the Xbox Series S that doesn't have the disc drive. But yeah, you could do this with an Xbox and some 4 Xbox wireless headsets.
There you go. And as a disc player, I have no problems with the Xbox. Really.
Yeah.
It's perfectly acceptable for my applications. Jay's old projection screen was an EluneVision Reference Studio 4K, not acoustically transparent, and he was happy with it. So when he was putting together his new home theater, he decided to go with the same screen material, but in a larger size and with a slim bezel frame. He ordered it a year ago, and it sat in its box until May of this year when his theater renovation was finally just about done. To his dismay, the new screen had very visible lines and wrinkles in the material. The manual said it could take up to 3 months for the tension to fully remove minor wrinkles that commonly occur during shipping, so he waited, but the lines and wrinkles never went away. It's tough to see via the iPhone photos he sent us, but to the naked eye and during regular movie images, they're very easily spotted and distracting. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So he wrote to EluneVision Canadian to Canadian. He expressed how disappointed he was and how he had expected better for the price, but didn't actually make any specific request of them. Boy, that sounds very passive-aggressive. That's very Canadian.
It is very Canadian. And then as far as Canadian service goes, I can say this is one thing that drives foreigners who are visiting Canada crazy, because when it comes to Canadian service, we don't volunteer or try to anticipate your needs at all. We're like, if you ask us to do something, yeah, we're willing to do it. But if you don't ask us directly, we're not going to try and anticipate your needs.
Yeah, so their reply was that he could try using a hair dryer on the back of the screen material, which might eliminate these creases, although they couldn't guarantee perfect results. He thought that was ridiculous to expect the customer to do that, but they haven't had any further communication since, until Rob's advice to Jay via email. So, what was Rob's advice to Jay via email?
Well, yeah.
I haven't read that yet? Okay, there's more to this?
There's more.
So who's in the wrong here? I think you all need to go to couples therapy and figure out how to communicate better. Is what's going on here. I think you're not asking for something, and they're like, well, if he's not asking, we're not giving.
That's
this whole thing is a mess. This is how I would have done it. I've been like, hey, it's probably my bad for leaving this thing in the box for a year, but I set it up. I waited the 3 months. It's still got creases in it.
Yeah.
Is there anything that can be done to fix these creases? And, what suggestions do you have?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a feeling they would have maybe answered a little bit differently, but we'll see here. He says is his anxiety just getting the better of him. What's really in his head is that the contractor who did his theater reno had warned him that EluneVision's quality control had gone downhill in recent years, and he said to get a Grandview brand screen instead. That is BS. This person, they always say that. It doesn't make any difference what thing you have. The person comes in and says, oh, well, the quality's been going down for years. That's why I only own Kenmore's. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? It's stupid. All right. But when Jay asked us, we said we hadn't heard a bunch of recent complaints about EluneVision, although it was obviously a possibility that we just weren't aware of. Jay doesn't blame us at all. So that's good, because we didn't leave it in a box for a year, nerd.
Oh, jeez.
Hey,
So I was getting punchy.
I am. I had a projector screen. We talked about this on here, and I had a projector screen that was a roll-up screen. I left it, for 2.5 years, just rolled up, right? Yeah. And when I unrolled it, it was a disaster. It was just the back had disintegrated, the PVC had degraded, and it had stuck to everything, and it was a weird sheen on everything. It was a mess. I didn't call the company because I didn't care, and it was fine. But also, I didn't blame Rob. I'm the one who rolled it up for 2 years and didn't use it. Anyway, I left my car in the garage for 2 years. I won't go up there. I wouldn't call Ford and say, "Hey, it's been out here for 2 years. Barely touched it. It's basically brand new." Rob suggested to Jay that he write a short, emotionless email to EluneVision with a specific request for what he wants them to do. Just stick to the facts. He's still within warranty. There you go. We don't know the results of the exchange yet as of this time of recording. So if that all works out, great. But if not, should he actually try the hairdryer suggestion? I mean, my first thing was get one of those steam things that you do for clothes.
For the woven acoustic, I agree. But for the vinyl ones, the steam doesn't really do anything.
Okay.
So for the vinyl ones, you gotta be careful with the hairdryer thing, because it can actually make it relax so much that it sags, which is worse than the crease. So it is a bit frightening. I gotta say, it is a bit frightening to go at the vinyl-based, non-acoustically transparent screens with the hairdryer. It can work, but it is a bit frightening. That's just how I feel about it.
Yeah. So I would not do anything until you get response about this email, obviously. Yeah. I mean, I think that's first of all, I have no idea if leaving it in a box for a year made any difference to it whatsoever. Unless I don't know why it would have creases. Does it come folded? I would assume it came rolled.
No, yeah, they usually come on a roll. But the thing is, let's say that roll got slightly squished,
right,
while it was stored. That would be enough. You would have creases, and they'd be in this every time you unroll the thing, there's another crease. It's exactly what it looks like. So it's certainly within the realm of possibility they got it ever so slightly squished. Even if you didn't do it, right? It just got slightly squished in the truck when it got delivered to your house, but then you never unpacked it. And so that is left there. So, I mean, those creases, like they say, normally the tension's enough to work that out over a couple, 3 months. In your case, it hasn't gone away. That's why they're like, the hairdryer trick can work, because it's applying a light heat to a vinyl surface that relaxes it. But you obviously don't want to sit it there enough that it starts to sag. So I think this is fixable. I don't actually think that the suggestion is ridiculous, because we're just talking about a rolled fabric that has a crease in it. How do we eliminate that? Heat. Yeah. That's always the solution, whatever the fabric might be, whatever the material might be. So that I don't agree with you that that's a ridiculous thing for them to tell you to do. However, if you were just uncomfortable with it, like I would be, I'm on your side on that. I would be a bit uncomfortable doing with it. You're within warranty. It should be possible to get an exchange. It might not be free. You might have to pay for shipping at the very least.
Yeah.
That's a bummer.
So this is what if they had responded to me with this hairdryer trick and I was feeling uncomfortable with it, then I would, my response to them would have been, that's great. Okay. Thanks for the suggestion. If something bad happens because of this hairdryer situation, what are going to be my recourses? Because I'm not going to want to buy a new screen. Now, they may say, we'll send you a new one and you'll pay shipping, or, make sure you do this, make sure you do that sort of thing. I don't know. But that, what I would be looking for was a little bit more direction. Like, I don't know what they sent you exactly. Because, hairdryers come in multiple temperatures, and some of them have multiple settings on multiple temperatures. So, I would want to say, hey, this is the hairdryer I have. This is how hot it says it gets. I could do it on low or high. And I looked online, this is what the low is, this is where the high is. How far away should I put it from? I would be like, hey, let's get some exact instructions from you so that if it doesn't work, I can say, well, I did what you said, it didn't work. Now the ball's in your court.
Yep.
So he says, if none of it works, what replacement screen should he resort to? We had said silver ticket to him, of course, but those aren't easy to get in Canada. So any other options? I would buy an EluneVision. Would
like just the material. You don't need the frame. Just the material.
I would 100%. This is not a problem with the quality control of this one company. It's not like you're indicative of like a vast, issue with every screen they make. I don't know what happened to this screen. I do know that I'm sure that if it was stored properly, it should have been able to sit in that box for a year and come out just fine. I would believe. You needed to wait 4 months and not 3 months, and it would be just fine. I don't know, but
getting a replacement material is absolutely possible and will cost less than buying a whole new screen of any kind. So that is still what I would end up doing, because that means at least you don't have to replace the whole frame. That said, Grandview in Canada is silver ticket. It's as far as I can tell, it's the same OEM behind, because the attachment method is identical. The frames are identical. Yeah. It's just that the Grandview screens in Canada are about twice the sticker price of silver ticket in the States, but that is, US to Canadian conversion and then importing it as well. So it's not really that outlandish. But yeah, Grandview would be fine. It's by every measure that I can see exactly the same as silver ticket. So that would be a reasonable way to go to.
Yeah. That'd be fine, but I would absolutely go EluneVision, no matter your negative connotations with them. We'll do one more, we'll be done. Kevin.
Oh no, we're gonna leave so many.
That's okay. I got workers going. I've got things to do.
I know you do.
I am not sticking around here. Kevin says, is there any perceptible difference in audio quality between Dolby True HD versions of Atmos versus Dolby Digital Plus versions of Atmos? One is lossless and one is lossy, right? So then what is Dolby Matte? So remember that the difference, there are of course differences, but the Atmos is just the metadata, right? It just moves the audio out of the base layer and into
you can
the
sort
overhead.
of think of it as an extension on top of things.
So I did write an article. I can try to find it and link it up or whatever. It doesn't matter. I think it was like Atmos out of 5.1 speakers. What am I missing? And the answer is you're not missing anything, because all the information, all the sounds are already in the base layer. They're all there. So the audio quality differences is not the difference between Dolby True HD Atmos and Dolby Digital Plus Atmos. It's the differences between Dolby True HD versions and
being
quality.
Lossless.
And lossless, but also it's a different mix, and the Dolby Digital Plus version and the sound quality that would normally be there. The Atmos pulling the stuff up should be, I'm not going to say it's identical because they're different mixes, but in theory it's just lifting those same sounds of that same quality out of the base layer mix and into the overhead speakers.
Yeah, Dolby True HD is fully lossless, so whatever the original master was, it's bit for bit identical once it gets decoded in your system. Dolby Digital Plus is lossy, and it has a huge variety of bit rates and amount of lossiness, just like MP3s can be anywhere from absolutely perceptibly lossless, right? You get 320 kilobit MP3 or AAC, or 256, honestly, AAC kilobit is perceptibly lossless, versus you can go down to 96 kilobit or something like that, and then you can definitely hear the difference, objectively so and subjectively so. So Dolby Digital Plus has a huge variety of bit rates that can be used, all the way from similar to very low bit rate MP3 or AAC, where you can hear the losses that have happened, all the way up to completely perceptibly lossless quality. That's all possible within Dolby Digital Plus. Dolby Matte is an interesting format because that is what the Xbox uses. It's what the Apple TV 4K uses. And in that case, what's happening is that source device is decoding everything first inside of itself to uncompressed, decoded PCM audio. And then to put it back into a Dolby Atmos bitstream container to output it to your device after that source device, after the Xbox, the Apple TV 4K, has done all of the muxing of audio that it wants to do inside of itself. It puts it into that Dolby MAT format, which just stands for Metadata Enhanced Audio Transmission. So it's a PCM signal, right? If you were to play it without a Dolby Atmos decoder, your receiver would report that it's playing multi-channel PCM. That would be the format that's coming from the Xbox or from the Apple TV 4K to your AV receiver. But it has this metadata enhanced audio transmission attached to that uncompressed multi-channel PCM, which if you have a Dolby Atmos decoder, gets activated and does the Atmos sounds. So Dolby MAT is when the source device has already decoded it itself, made some adjustments or muxing of other sounds like button clicks and menus and stuff like that, navigation, put all that in there, and then it puts it all into this Dolby Atmos metadata enhanced container for your AV receiver to decode. But if your AV receiver doesn't have Dolby Atmos, you'll just get multi-channel PCM at that stage. So those are the differences there.
He asks, if you were to take the HDMI 2.0 board out of the AV receiver and install into the old Onkyo TX NR818, would that allow the 818 to handle 4K video?
That is a purely hypothetical because there's no chance you're ever doing that.
No.
That's not going to work.
I mean, so the HDMI board, I mean, it includes the inputs, includes the outputs, right? It should. I mean, I have no idea. It feels like it feels like it.
I think
should.
He's picturing a computer's GPU, where you can swap one GPU for an upgraded GPU. The HDMI board inside an AV receiver is bespoke to that AV receiver. Like, you can't even take an Onkyo 818 and then take an 808 from the year previous and swap their HDMI boards. It's like, it's completely bespoke to that model. These aren't like standardized, output boards that you can swap like you can in a PC, where there's a standardized bus and protocol for those things to plug into. These are one-off for that model only. So there's logistically no way you can actually do that. It's a purely hypothetical question.
Yeah. And I feel like there should be more to it than that too. It's not just that board. There's got to be other things that are going on in there.
Well, there's all the chip processing, everything that has to talk to each other throughout there. Yeah, there's absolutely no way that you could do this. There's no swapping of HDMI boards that you can do for yourself.
So Kevin's room is roughly 13 by 26 by 9, or about 3,000 cubic feet in air volume. How does that tell us which subwoofer models are capable of fully pressurizing the space? And can a pair of SVS PB1000 non-pro subwoofers do it? He must admit he was initially underwhelmed by their sound, but it turned out to be exactly what we often say. Properly setting up good dual subwoofers can sound quieter than your old setup, which in his case used to be boomy, which he mistook at first for impressive. Now that he knows better, and as his subs do what they are supposed to do when they are supposed to do it, and nothing, as his subs do what they are supposed to do and whatever, and nothing else. So, first of all, how do you know? So, the amount of volume that they can put out, the amount of pressure that they can put out, sound pressure that they can put out, tells you how big of a space they can fill. The easiest way to know is to either read a review that basically reveals this to you, or ask the manufacturer. Most of the time, the manufacturers will tell you it can fill up this much space. So, PB1000s, I mean, PBs are pretty powerful. 3,000 cubic feet seems a little bit on the big size for...
Ever so slightly, yeah. I mean, like, honestly, Audioholics' Bassaholic Room Guide is a nice, easy way to target this. Now, the Bassaholic Room Guide is not going all the way to full 115 decibel cinema reference volume at 20 hertz. The Bassaholic Room Guide, I haven't read it all in detail in several years at this point, but I remember them like basically looking for greater than 110 dB output at 25 hertz, and then still having, very substantial output, only 3 to 5 decibels quieter than that down at 20 hertz. So if we're literally talking cinema reference 115 decibel maximum at 20 hertz, okay, the Bassaholic Room Guide doesn't quite get you there, but it certainly puts you in the ballpark. So like going back to the model that was previous to the PB1000, the PB12 NSD, that was already rated as a Bassaholic large certification, and the large room is 3,000 to 5,000 cubic feet. So you're right at the bottom end of that, or the very top end of the medium-sized room. The PB1000 was able to play about 1.5, 2 decibels louder than the PB12 NSD. And then the PB1000 Pro has gotten another 1.5 to 2 decibels louder than the PB1000 non-Pro. So you are definitely comfortable in that large end of the medium room, small end of the large room, 3,000 cubic foot range. Will you actually be hitting 115 decibels at 20 hertz? No, but you will be getting greater than 110 decibels at 25 hertz. And that honestly is as much as you could possibly genuinely want that deep down in the bass. So yes, the short answer is yes. Your pair of PB1000 Pros work very nicely in your room size.
Yeah. So he has measured with Room Q Wizard. The seat in the very corner of the room has a hump, and the outermost seat has a slight dip. But the main listening position measures well, and the other seats are reasonably uniformed. And this is a small space. Well, it looks small.
Well, medium-sized room.
Medium-sized room. But the couches are almost on the walls. They're a little bit off the walls.
Pretty darn close, yeah.
He hasn't acoustically treated his room yet, but the main panels he plans to install aren't thick enough to be considered bass straps. That said, he was thinking he could just cover some rock wool insulation with acoustically transparent fabric and fill up the space beneath and behind his couch. There's a good 6 inches of space underneath and about 10 inches of space in the floor-to-wall edges behind the couch. Do we think filling all that unused space with insulation will help tame the peak and even out the slight dip and those problem seats?
It can't hoit.
It won't hurt. I would be surprised if it made like if it just evened everything out and everything was perfect in the entire room. Like, even if it very
much depends on what frequency are those peak and dip actually happening at.
Yeah, there's that. I mean, honestly, whenever you put a seat in a corner or near a bunch of, I mean, even your other seats are basically right against the wall. The fact that they're uniform at all is just a testament to your placement of subwoofers, really.
That's right.
And being able to get a slightly uniform or a fairly uniform response is already great. Putting the panels in there is certainly not going to hurt anything. As far as your uniformity is only going to make things better. Those seats in those corners and those weird spots, they're always going to be problematic. And
definitely. And if you EQ'd to make them flat, then it would affect the primary seat. Yes. It would have, like, if you really tamed the peak that's happening in the corner seat, well, now you'd have a scoop out in the primary seat. So you probably don't really want to do that. It's not going to hurt anything, but I mean, like, look, if the peak that you're having in that corner seat is at 50 hertz, then a 10-inch thick panel in the bottom corner of your room is not going to touch that. The 10-inch thick panel is going to get you down to 80 hertz, maybe 70, 75 hertz, something like that. It's going to have some impact there. But if that peak is happening down at 50 or 45 hertz or something like that, you're not going to touch it with a passive bass trap. So it very much is frequency dependent. But if you're noticing that the peak is in the 70, 80, 90, 100 hertz range, then certainly having bass trapping in this room can have an impact there. So it's very much frequency dependent. But I like this idea regardless. It's not going to hurt anything. It's only going to help your crossover region, and it's going to be completely visually hidden. So I'm in favor of doing this regardless.
Yeah, I think so. I think basically I've written more than one article that basically says if you're thinking of putting a panel or insulation or some sort of bass trapping or acoustic treatment in your room, and you're wondering if you should do it because you're not sure it'll make a difference, just do it. Just do it. It won't hurt anything. So the option here, Rob, is you go on without me.
I see.
Or we end the podcast because I'm leaving. Right. I'm done.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I've got I mean, this would be extra long, but I honestly I would like to just clear the docket so it's out of my mind. If you're all right with me doing that, it's going to be a crazy long episode. Going to be 3 hours probably, but why not? There's going to be a week missing.
Okay. Well, you guys enjoy Rob and whatever the passive aggressive responses from the Canadian. Except Rob's not really very passive aggressive.
I can be. I certainly can be. Yes.
Maybe you are when you talk to other Canadians, but when you talk to me, they're not as passive aggressive as you could be, I think.
Well, also, we've known each other for well over a decade at this point. Hopefully, I would have adjusted the way I speak to you a little bit.
That's right. You speaking American?
Suit your
Speak American, boy. This is America.
I think I've noticed a change in Tom over the years, having spoken to me all this time. So there you go.
Could be. All right.
I think so.
Everybody, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and hopefully I will not have any more days like I had yesterday.
Everybody listening, send some good vibes to Tom. My goodness, you deserve at least that much. Yes. Merry Christmas, Tom. Happy New Year to you and your family. And we'll see you in 2024.
See you in 2024.
All right, so here's me carrying on by myself, and I'll go on to, let's see, where were we? Steven's question? Yep, Steven's question. Steven says, almost 20 years ago, sorry, I was trying to set up some things here. Yeah, almost 20 years ago, he imported a 2-channel Shengya amplifier from China. Its specs say that it can deliver 2 times 150 watts into 8 ohms, class AB, but it also says that the first 10 watts are pure, class A. Yes, there you go. Sorry, Tom was just waving goodbye there. So he asks, does that actually make any audible difference to the sound quality? He's looked up the differences between Class A and Class AB amplifiers, and Class D as well for that matter, but he couldn't find much information about how making the first 10 watts of that pure Class A and then transitioning to Class AB to go from the 10 to 150 watt maximum that it says that it can deliver. So how does that actually affect the sound quality? What do we have to say? So, of course, it's only going to be what do I have to say in this case. Very nice looking equipment. He's shared some photos of it, so he's got a lovely stand there holding all of that. Let's see, where is that Class A/Class AB amplifier? Is it on the very bottom there? Because my goodness, that might be cooking everything that's above it. Even just the 10 watts of Class A is going to be burning a whole lot of electricity and converting that just into heat the vast majority of time. But yeah, for those who are unfamiliar, you've got a signal that's coming in, and if we just translate it easily visually to a pure sine wave signal that we might be getting as in terms of an audio signal, if we draw just the neutral line that goes completely flat horizontally across our graph, then there's going to be the portion of the sine wave that goes above that perfectly flat horizontal line, and then it's going to come down, meet that line, and then go below that perfectly flat horizontal line, and then come back up, and then go above it, come back down, go below, come back up. That's going to be the sine wave shape, and we can draw a perfectly flat horizontal line straight down the middle of that. So we call that portion above that horizontal line the positive portion of the signal, and we call the portion below it the negative portion of the signal. So in a pure Class A amplifier, you have sort of 2 halves of the amplifier, 1 half that's amplifying the positive side and 1 half that's amplifying the negative side. But both halves of that Class A amplifier are constantly using as much power as they can. They just never stop. If there's no sound for them to produce, they convert 100% of the electricity into heat and just dissipate it. And that's why Class A amps get very, very hot and why they're like 10% efficient. But when there's a signal there, they're just ready to go, raring to go, constant power flowing through the output transistors of a pure Class A amplifier, both the positive and the negative. And so the claim is that you get the lowest distortion possible, because the amplifier is essentially never changing its state. It's just like, yeah, I'm burning these 20 watts, in the case of 10 watts times 2, I'm burning these 20 watts 100% of the time. If there's sound there, great, I'll go ahead and amplify it. If there's not sound there, I'm still burning that electricity and just purely converting it into heat. So in a Class AB amplifier, let's say a Class B amplifier first, just a pure Class B amplifier. You separate the 2 halves of that signal, and the 1 half of the amplifier only ever activates on the positive part of that signal, and then it shuts off 100%. And now the second half of the amplifier takes over and amplifies the negative half of the signal, and then 100% shuts off. That would be a pure Class B. So you're saying, okay, there's this portion right at that flat horizontal line where the Class A amplifier, or the positive side of the amplifier in the pure Class B, has to 100% shut off instantaneously, and the negative half of the Class B amplifier has to turn on to full power instantaneously. And so there's this little moment right there where one is trying to turn off instantaneously and the other one is trying to turn on, and then they flip back and forth over and over, where there's typically a whole bunch of noise and distortion gets introduced in the signal right at that moment of transition. So we ended up with this Class AB amplifier, which is still using the Class B design. Half of the amplifier is only amplifying the positive portion of the signal, half of the amplifier is only amplifying the negative portion of the signal. But for that region where you're crossing over from one half to the other, there's what they call a Class A bias applied. Just think of it as a bit of smoothing, right? Where we're just going to have a bit of a handoff, bit of a transition, where we're not expecting half of the amplifier to shut off instantaneously 100% while the other half activates 100% instantaneously. We're going to have a bit of a transition between the two halves of the amplifier and smooth all of that out. That's the Class AB. So that makes it considerably more efficient because most of the time only half of the amplifier is on and burning electricity and the other half is fully off, and it's just in those transitions between the two halves of the amplifier that we're burning some electricity on both sides. So much more efficient than pure Class A, but without the distortion that's introduced by pure Class B. So because in the lower wattage, that's going to be the lower volume level, right? We're saying that, well, if we've got a bit more distortion going on, we're going to have a higher potential, a higher possibility of hearing it at the lower volume level, where the signal, the actual signal that we're wanting to hear, is just barely above the noise floor or barely above whatever distortion is coming into the signal, and therefore for like the first watt is often sort of said, well, if we can have that first watt as pure Class A, then that's going to be superior certainly to then pure Class B. We're not going to have any of that transition distortion between the two halves of the amplifier. But honestly, these days, Class AB amplifiers have gotten so good at completely ameliorating and hiding that transition between the two halves that I would argue it is imperceptible at this point. I would argue that it is not audible, that a well-designed, and they don't have to be crazy expensive these days, a well-designed Class AB amplifier is so good in that transition area that even during that first watt where the signal is barely louder than the noise floor, than the distortion, that it really is not an issue anymore. So to me, I think a lot of it is just language, right? People see that word pure in front of Class A and think that means it's a pure sound. It's not always the case. In fact, there are many Class A amplifiers that, because they are just constantly burning electricity, if you don't have sufficient heat sinking to wick that all away, those can be the noisier amplifier. It's quite easy to make a lot of noise from a Class A amplifier if you aren't dissipating all of the heat that it's being generated constantly completely sufficiently, or your room is just hotter. Your room is ambiently hotter than is necessary to completely wick all of that heat away, and all of a sudden you get this low-level static hiss from your Class A amplifier at all times. Much less likely to happen with a good Class AB. So I would argue at this point that the Class AB is really the only thing that makes sense to use anymore, and worrying about pure Class A is really a thing that's due to the language, due to that word pure, which doesn't mean purity of sound. It just means it is a Class A amplifier and nothing else. Okay, so let's move on to Kiran in India. Kiran's brother is putting together a home theater now. The room is roughly 14 feet by 18 feet or so. He wants to have an acoustically transparent screen with the front speakers visually hidden behind it. So someone suggested, I don't know who, going with some QSC speakers. They are like commercial movie theater style speakers. They've got a 12-inch woofer and a compression tweeter in a deep waveguide, essentially a horn, front ported with dual triangular ports on there, and they boast a 95 decibel sensitivity, 300 watt sustained and 600 watt peak power handling, and they go for about $1,000 each in India. Then Kiran and his brother also came across Ascendo's speakers, which honestly have very similar specs, but they use a coaxial driver design with the tweeter embedded into the middle of the 12-inch woofer there. But those cost almost $2,000 each, but similar sensitivity, similar power handling. So Kiran asked a few installers about them, and they all said that they were not appropriate for his brother's application. They say they'd sound too bright, although there was a YouTuber who told him he could EQ the speakers, they'd be okay. But he's saying he wants to drive his speakers with a Denon X4700H receiver. So he liked that this high efficiency, high sensitivity spec was there. And he's wondering, like, are the installers just discouraging them from buying either the QSC speakers, the Ascendo speakers, because they don't make as much margin off of them? Or are they honestly not the right choice in this room? So my opinion is, yeah, I agree with the installers. These are not the right choice for a 14-foot by 18-foot room where, yeah, even if you've got these pressed up against the front wall and you're sitting with your back right against the back wall, the maximum distance you're sitting is like less than 18 feet, right? Your ears are going to be a little bit of a distance in front of the back wall. The front of these speakers is going to be a little bit of a distance in front of the front wall. So like, honestly, 16, 17 feet is the maximum distance that you're going to be sitting there. It just isn't necessary to go with speakers of this size or even price, honestly, frankly, but like it just isn't necessary to go with speakers of this level of sensitivity. And hopefully, if you're advising him on building this theater, he won't have his seats pressed right back against the back wall, and they're going to be much more in the 12-foot range from ears to speakers or something like that. There's no shortage of power in the X4700H with regular consumer speakers. I would certainly encourage you to consider speakers other than this. I mean, look, if you're drawn to high efficiency, Klipsch is definitely available in India. There are other high efficiency designs, but that truly isn't necessary. You're in a room size that makes perfect sense for regular consumer level speakers to work here. If you are going to have them right against the front wall, behind the acoustically transparent screen, then yeah, it sort of makes sense to go with a front ported or a sealed design, but that is readily available. So, yeah. I agree with the installers. This is designed for a considerably larger, greater seating distance scenario, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me that these are the speakers that you choose to go with. Would it be like, if you already own these, could you use them? There's going to be some issues just with the integration of the sound between the 12-inch driver and the compression horn-loaded tweeter. Like I said, they're just meant to be heard from like 20, 25 feet away. That's the way they were designed. Just like you wouldn't necessarily use a Klipsch tower speaker sitting at your desk from 2 feet away. That just wouldn't be the right choice. You want to have the right choice of speaker for the application, for the size of the room and the listening distance. So there's no reason to avoid just regular consumer speakers in this case. That would be the right choice. All right, one moment as I take a sip of water here. I don't have anyone to cover for me. Just a moment, please. There we go. Let's move on to Kevin. Kevin uses a projector and an AV receiver, so he doesn't have any over-the-air antennas built into his equipment. Is there a simple over-the-air tuner he could buy to just plug into his AV receiver and use just like any other HDMI source? So, yes, with some caveats on what it's capable of doing. ADTH has released their next-gen TV box. They sell it for $90. It is a single tuner. But that one tuner is capable of tuning into both the next-gen TV ATSC 3.0 signals and the ATSC 1.0 HD TV signals. That single tuner works for both. Now, the claim to fame of this ADTH next-gen TV box for $90 is that it is like the only external ATSC 3.0 tuner box you can buy that is like fully supporting the DRM that they have unfortunately added to the next gen TV signals to prevent you from copying and recording them. So other tuners, external tuners like the HD Home Run, which I'm also going to mention here in a moment, but those ones don't have the DRM decoding, the digital rights management copy protection decoding. This ADTH next gen TV box does, so it is the most complete solution for ATSC 3.0, and then of course works with ATSC 1.0 as well. But like I say, for $90, it's a single tuner, has an HDMI port on the back, plug it right into your AV receiver. But at the moment, you can't use it as a DVR. At the moment, you can't plug a hard drive into its USB port and record stuff off of it. It's just a live tuner. They have mentioned that is functionality that they are hoping to add, but because they are trying to support the official DRM scheme and the anti-copy protection and all that, it might not happen. We have to consider that as a possibility. So the solutions, if you do want to be able to record over-the-air television, they really are the HD home run is the easiest one I'm going to point you to. You can get the Flex 4K for $300. That provides you two ATSC 3.0 tuners and two separate ATSC 1.0 tuners. So 4 tuners in total, but 2 of them are the next-gen TV ATSC 3.0 standard. And these devices, the Flex 4K from HD Home Run, it connects to your network. So you have to have some other device, and that can be a Roku, an Apple TV 4K, an Amazon Fire TV, like any of your standard streaming sticks. That is what you would plug into your AV receiver with its HDMI port, and then there's an HD Home Run app that you use. So those things talk to each other across the network, and the HD Home Run tuner just sits connected via an Ethernet cable to your network router, and your over-the-air antenna connects to the HD Home Run. So there's no direct connection from the antenna to your projector, in that case, or your AV receiver, but it's sitting on the network, and then you just use a streaming stick device to connect to your AV receiver or your television via HDMI. So yeah, $300 for that, but that gives you DVR capability, but it isn't able to tune into the DRM protected ATSC 3.0 channels. So either way, there's a drawback, but those are your solutions. Next is Nelson. Nelson has a Denon X3600H receiver and an Oppo 203 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. Is there any way to connect the Oppo's multi-channel analog audio outputs to the Denon X3600H. He noticed that in the manual, the Denon's analog inputs say they are assignable, but can they be reassigned to work together as a multi-channel analog input? Short answer to this one, no. The X3600H does not have a multi-channel analog input. It just has stereo analog inputs. So there is simply no way to do what you want to do in this instance. You cannot take the multi-channel analog outputs of your Oppo Blu-ray player and plug them into the back of your Denon X3600H and actually have multi-channel audio. Marantz, the sister company to Denon, that is where you'll find multi-channel analog inputs, although even that is starting to disappear on some of their newest models. So you have to specifically look for those 7.1 analog RCA inputs on the back if you want it. So this would mean buying a new receiver if that's what you want to do. But my advice would be stick to using HDMI. There's really no particular reason that you need the Oppo player to do the audio decoding beforehand. I would send the you can have it decode it into multi-channel PCM and send that via HDMI to your X3600H. That'll work perfectly fine. Or you can have the Oppo output the original bit stream and let your Denon do the decoding of whatever the audio format might be. So I would certainly use the digital connection in this case, HDMI. And if you just want the Oppo to do the audio decoding, you can set it to do that and have it output multi-channel PCM. That would absolutely be the way that I would come at this. Okay, let's see. I think we got 2 more coming up. Anthony has owned a full Klipsch Reference 2 set of speakers for about 13 years now. One of the reasons he went with Klipsch is because he is using them in a wide open room. The living room itself has a footprint of about 12 feet by 27 feet, but then it has a vaulted ceiling and it's open to the kitchen and a hallway, and the doors are not always closed when they're listening to something. So it's essentially the whole bottom floor of the house and even some of the top floor, I would imagine, with the vaulted ceiling. So he said the Klipsch speakers, they've been able to play loud enough to cover the entire bottom floor of the house. Not that it really needs that, but they certainly don't struggle when it comes to just sheer volume output. But for whatever reason, he's just itching for a change. Maybe he's just read too many times about Klipsch speakers being bright, and now they do seem to sound a little shrieky to him. And he's, maybe he's just looking to change things up, but he's considering a speaker change, not even necessarily going to call it upgrade, but just some different speakers. So he's using a Denon X4500H receiver, and he has an Emotiva XPA5 amplifier as well. So no shortage of wattage on tap. His subwoofer is an SVS PB2000. So he's listened to Paradigm's speakers in-store demos several times, and he really likes them, at least in that store setting. Both the Premier series, which is, so there's the Monitor series, which is like their entry level, then the Premier series is above that, then the Founders series, and then the Prestige series at the very top are their flagships. So the Premier series and the Founders series are both on sale right now. He's wondering if he should pounce on some Paradigm speakers. But he's wondering, can the Paradigm speakers contend with his room size? He doesn't want to take a step backwards in sound quality, and from his experience in the stores, the Founders series models don't seem to be worth nearly twice the price of the Premier series. He's also thinking he could replace his entire 7-speaker Klipsch setup with all Paradigm Premier speakers if he bounces on them at the sale price, but he'd only be able to afford like the front left to right, or maybe the front left, right, and center of the Founders series, price for price, if he were to go with those right now. So he just asks, what should he do? Okay. So, like, my honest take is, if you are satisfied certainly with the volume output of your Klipsch speakers, and you're just finding their treble to be a bit pronounced, you could probably ameliorate that with some EQ. That would be my first approach, would be to, spend $20 on the Odyssey Mult EQ editor app and just institute a bit more of a high frequency roll off and run Odyssey again through the Odyssey editor app. Because I'm thinking you might not need to buy new speakers to get the experience that you want. This might be as simple as using the manually controllable room correction, which is available as a $20 app add-on on your phone or your tablet, and drawing your own target curve, or just choosing the little bit more aggressive high-frequency roll-off that is pre-built as an option that you can just choose in the Odyssey editor app. Just go for a bit greater of a high frequency roll-off, and that might be all you need for a very small amount of money. You still get to spend something, but it's not much, and then you put in a little time of running Odyssey again. That is my genuine recommendation, because honestly, the volume of air, taking the width, depth, and height of the total area in your house where the air can move, has much more of an impact on that PB2000 of yours than it does on the speakers. Now, there is an impact on the speakers because there is that crossover region between the speakers and subwoofers that is still very much bass. The speakers are definitely playing a large portion of sounds from 500 hertz on down. So it does matter how much bass your speakers can output in a wide open setting like this. But as far as the mid-range and the treble above 500 hertz, that's more to do with your listening distance from the speakers. You're getting a greater proportion of direct sound versus reflected sound in that mid-range and treble. So the listening distance matters more for that, which the Paradigms would have no trouble with. They're on the higher end of normal when it comes to sensitivity, and then can handle about 200 watts consistently, which your Emotiva amplifier can deliver. So you could sort of max out the capabilities of the Paradigm speakers. And in terms of just listening distance, I would have no qualms about that. Will they have the bass output to go along with the full room size? Well, honestly, the bass output of the Klipsch speakers is not where they have the super high sensitivity. It's much more in the treble that the Klipsch speakers have the super high sensitivity. So I would say that if you're fine with the bass integration of your Klipsch speakers and you did go with the Paradigm speakers, I don't anticipate you having a problem. As far as the seating distance for the treble and mid-range, that shouldn't be a problem, and you have the amplifier power on tap to fully maximize them. So I'm saying it's fine to go with the Paradigm series. I personally like that Premier series the best out of Paradigms. I like the Prestige series. I do like those beryllium tweeters, but they are vastly more expensive. So I'm not the biggest fan of the Founders series. They're trying something a little different there. It's the first time that I can recall Paradigm using coaxial driver designs in any of their speakers. And I think there's some refinement that they are most likely going to do with a second version of the Founders series at some point. But I think that Premier series is the way to go if you want to do it. But my real answer, and I think Tom would agree with me on this, is I would definitely spend $20 on the Odyssey editor app first and give that a try, because that might be all you need to spend to get the results that you want. Okay, Alex. Alex went ahead and got the JDS Labs Atom DAC 2 and Atom Amp 2 headphone amplifier and DAC combo that I recommended. Couple $100, $250 or so gets you that combination that you can plug into your computer or amplify any headphones that way. Now he's thinking he'd also like to get some new headphones. So he's got a budget of as much as $1,000. He was eyeing a pair of Sennheiser HD 650s years ago, but he figured the headphone landscape must have changed since then. So he's interested in both open back and closed back headphones. He's leaning toward getting a new pair of closed back headphones first. So what's our experience and take on open back versus closed back? Well, I mean, closed back, it's sort of inevitable that you're going to have some bit of resonance in a frequency at some point. I mean, they can tune the headphones as well as they can, but it's like unavoidable that there's going to be a resonant frequency in a closed back headphone design. Just think of putting yourself in a very small room and putting speakers in there. You can EQ the heck out of the speakers, but you're going to have some frequencies that are just trapped in that room, bouncing back and forth and resonating. And so there's always going to be a bit of unevenness in the frequency response at some point in a closed back headphone. And then, of course, there's just the comfortability. Closed back headphones are always going to get hotter on your head than an open back headphone where the air can flow a little bit. So my preference generally is for open back headphones as long as somebody sitting next to me doesn't mind hearing a bit of sound coming out of my headphones. And of course, noise isolation for myself inside of the headphones is not going to be as good as closed back headphones that can block out like sound protective hearing. They can act that way. So those are caveats. But generally, I find just the linearity of the frequency response, it's going to be easier to have that sound linear and without any resonant frequencies going on in an open back headphone design. But then, of course, with an open back, you don't get any bass reinforcement. So it tends to be the case that open back headphones have more of a bass roll off, whereas closed back headphones can perhaps take advantage of some of that resonance to give you stronger bass back. So I kind of like the idea of having both and being able to switch between them. There's going to be some times where the closed back is what you want to use for the application, and sometimes where the open back is going to be better. So with $1,000 budget, I really think you can get both, because honestly, the headphones that I'm recommending are nowhere near this sort of price range of $1,000. I'm going to suggest 4 headphones to you, 2 open back, 2 closed back, and you could get all 4 of them for your $1,000 budget and have yourself a fun time comparing them. So I'm actually these days recommending Sennheiser's HD 560S. They normally sell for $230, but they're on sale right now for $180. These are open back headphones. They are marvelously accurate, super comfortable to wear, work well with any decent headphone amplifier. I'm a big fan of the HD 560S, and for the price, I mean, no complaints that you can really have about them there. For an open back headphone, super comfortable to wear. Those are my top choice for sure. And then there's the HD 569, which sells for $150, which doesn't use the exact same drivers as the 560S, I must say, but it is a closed back design with the exact same physical design. So the comfort is the same, except that it's closed back, so they do get hotter. But for $150, you can definitely get both of them and have a closed back version and an open back version. I think the open back version sounds better, but when you want the attributes of a closed back headphone, for $150, you can have those HD 569s from Sennheiser and still have really, really nice sound quality inside of those. Then, if you want to go for something a little bit more esoteric, a little bit more fun to try out, Hi-Fi Man has their planar magnetic headphones, and I really like the Sundera model the best. The open back version sells for $300, and then they have a closed back version that they're selling for $150 right now. That is on discount, but they're selling the closed back version of the Sundera for $150. I don't myself like the sort of yellowish orangish wood finish that they have on the closed back version, and it's the only color option that they have. I'm not a huge fan of the looks personally, but maybe you like them or maybe you don't care. So like I say, $180, $150, $300, and $150, you can get all 4 of them and compare as you like, planar magnetic versus dynamic, open back versus closed back. And for me personally, I don't see a really compelling reason to spend a whole lot more for headphones. You can get things that sound a bit different. But if what you want is nice accuracy, great comfort, those are my 4 picks there. So I made a mistake. There is actually one more person on the list, and that will be it for 2023. Mohsen is back to say that he implemented our subwoofer placement advice. I'm showing the photos that he sent in before, so this isn't showing the new location of the front sub. Just picture it on the left side of the center speaker instead of on the right side from the old photo that I'm showing there. And then, yes, his second subwoofer is on the back wall just to the right of his seats. So now he's got a subwoofer just to the right of center on the back wall and a subwoofer just to the left of center on the front wall. They are diagonally across the room from each other. If you drew a straight line from subwoofer to subwoofer, that line would intersect the very middle of the room. So he says, now with that subwoofer placement, it's the darndest thing. We, Tom and Rob, never could have guessed it, but he's noticed an improvement in the way that his bass sounds. What do you know? So he busted out his U-Mic 1 measurement microphone and Room EQ Wizard. He took a quick measurement in his main seat. He has his pair of subs running through a mini DSP to apply a bit of gradual bass boost. So he sort of has his own target curve for his bass. But he didn't mess around too much with like independent delay and gain settings for the 2 subwoofers or independent equalization adjustments for each subwoofer individually before pairing them together yet. He just, did this placement, applied his target curve, and he got the following graph that I'm showing here that he shared. So how much does he need to recalibrate and adjust delays and whatnot? Is he pretty much done? Didn't seem that difficult, and that is the point. This is a tremendously non-squiggly line. Like, he really hasn't smoothed this very much at all, and you can plainly see the slight rise in bass target curve that he's got, going from 60 hertz down to below 20 hertz. Keep in mind, yes, is there a little bit of up and down? Is it a perfectly flat, gradually sloping line? No, of course not. But this is plus minus 2 decibels at the worst when you're following the trend line. This is a fantastic result. Now, does that mean you're 100% done? Not necessarily. If you really just care about that main seat and you're perfectly fine if the other seats in your room don't have, the exact same experience as the main seat, then you are done, because you have the results in your main seat that you were targeting with the target curve that you decided on using your mini DSP. You're done for the main seat. But what you would want to do at this point is also measure in any of the other seats that you do care about, because we don't just want the main seat to be good and then have considerably different experiences in the other seats. We want to have nice uniform response, right? Is it going to be literally lay the lines on top of each other and there's no difference whatsoever? No, that's unreasonable to expect. But what we want to see is, any of the seats that we care about don't have some giant suck out at some point. That wouldn't be a great result. We want to see pretty darn close to uniform response. So that would be the next step. But you have certainly set yourself up with the best chances to achieve that by having this across the room from each other physical placement of your 2 subs. I would anticipate that the uniformity of your bass now across all of your seats is considerably better than when you had both subwoofers just at the front of your room, which is how this whole thing started. Both subs were at the front on either side of that center speaker. That was the beginning point of all this. Now you should definitely have, if you did ever take measurements in all of your seats when you had both subs at the front of the room, having them across the room from each other should definitely give you greater uniformity across all the seats that you care about now. But if it isn't uniform enough to your liking, that's where we're going to start getting into making some adjustments on a individual subwoofer basis. I would recommend, if you're into that, using the multi-sub optimizer software. It's free and it integrates with the mini DSP and with Room EQ Wizard. It does its best job when you have more than 2 subwoofers. When you have 3 or 4 subwoofers, the multi-sub optimizer software does its best work at that point, but it still does function with just dual subwoofers. And so if you are getting into that individual delay, gain, and EQ settings for sub 1 and sub 2 separately, the multi-sub optimizer software can certainly simplify that process for you. So I can recommend using that if you discover that the uniformity across all your seats is not as good as you want it to be. So there we go. We have come to the end of this episode, the end of 2023. Happy New Year, everybody. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays from Tom and myself on Tom's behalf. We're going to go back up here to thank our listeners of the week one more time before we leave. Tyler, thank you so much for your PayPal donation. And thanks so much to our 134 patrons over at patreon.com/AVRant podcast. Thank you all so much for your financial support. Jack, thank you for thinking of Tom when you noticed that something wasn't quite right with the AV Gadgets website, but thankfully that worked itself out, or Tom behind the scenes was working on it just as you happened to be looking at it. But very nice that you thought of him and wanted to give him the heads up. And then thank you so much to Joe, Jonathan, Dazz, Ben, Jay, Kevin S, Stephen, Kevin P, and Anthony for your notes of gratitude and encouragement for keeping this podcast going. We certainly plan to all throughout 2024 as well. So that is very much appreciated. And a big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. If you want your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. That is by far the best way to reach us. question@avrant.com. So, on behalf of Tom Andrew and for AV Rant, I am Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AV Rant.
Now go out and listen to something.